You've been told that time moves forward, that it ticks, stretches, flows. But what if that's only the story you were taught, not the one you're living? What if every second you experience is simply a reflection of something you already saw, already thought, already were? In this journey, we won't walk a straight path. We'll stand in front of time like a mirror and watch it stare back. The moments you remember, the ones you haven't lived yet, they might not be different at all. So close your eyes. Let's begin where you've already been. You wake up one morning, and everything feels off. The air doesn't move the way it should. The light outside seems familiar, not in the comforting way, but in the way déjà vu wraps around your ribs and squeezes. You walk to the mirror, not expecting anything unusual, and yet you hesitate. Why? Because you've seen this before, not yesterday, not in a dream, but in some eerie fold of memory that doesn't belong to any specific day. It feels like you're watching yourself watching yourself. You haven't even spoken yet, and already the moment feels rehearsed. You were told time was a straight line, that one thing follows another, that beginnings are born from nothing, and march forward into something else, like dominoes, falling forever. But there's a creeping suspicion somewhere in your chest that this isn't how you've actually lived your life. Not really. What if time isn't a path, but a mirror bending around you, reflecting what you're not quite ready to see? It starts when you try to remember your first memory. Go ahead, try. Can you do it? Or does your mind throw you into a blur of someone else's voice saying, "You were so little then," as if the beginning of your life was only ever told to you, reflected through another's account? The truth is, you can't go back to the start because it never really felt like yours to begin with. Your first moment might just be the point where the mirror began showing you the reflection, not where you actually began. This thought spreads like ink. What if every moment you think is happening right now has already happened, and you're just remembering it poorly? What if you're not moving forward, but simply bouncing between mirrored moments, slightly warped with each pass? We call it déjà vu, but maybe it's not a glitch. Maybe it's the mirror aligning for just a second, just enough for you to glimpse both sides at once. Not past and future, but twin illusions staring at each other. And the strangest part, the more you chase these beginnings, the more they retreat. Every time you try to draw a timeline, a clean, simple first this, then that, the line begins to fold. You realize your decisions feel less like choices and more like echoes. You choose something, and then notice how that choice was already hinted at, whispered in symbols days ago. A poster you saw, a word someone said, a number that repeated. It's like time is playing a game with you, and you only notice when you're still enough to watch it playing. So let's stop pretending this started anywhere. There was no first domino, no original spark, only reflections of reflections, bending inward like a hall of mirrors in an abandoned carnival. And in the middle of it, you, not walking through time, but standing still as time loops and curves and observes you from every angle. Have you ever felt like a moment was waiting for you? Like you didn't step into it, but it stepped around you? Maybe that's because the moment wasn't ahead of you. It was behind the mirror, waiting to match your gaze. Maybe all these mirrors are aligned not by clocks, but by attention. Wherever you look, it reflects. Wherever you forget, it fades. You were never moving forward. You were simply remembering yourself remembering, a loop disguised as a journey. It's hard to notice until you stop, until you catch your own reflection thinking before you do, until you hear someone say something you swore you already heard, not yesterday, but in a moment that never made it onto the calendar. When you pause in those moments, reality flickers, not with mystery, but with recognition, as if the universe just turned its head toward you and said, "You've seen this before, haven't you?" And you nod. Because you have. So what now? If time is a mirror, what do we do with that reflection? We observe, quietly, patiently, not to trace a line forward, but to watch the way light bends, how memory folds into the present, how the future shimmers backward through choices you haven't made yet. And you'll start to notice more. Not in the big events, but in the tiny loops. The song you hear twice in a day, the stranger who looks like someone from a dream, the way your hand moves before you decide to move it. These aren't random. They're not signs either. They're reflections. Small, silent confirmations that you're not walking through time. You're surrounded by it, as if time itself is watching you from all angles, waiting to see which version of you will look up and notice. You don't need to believe it all yet. Just begin noticing. And the moment you do, time might begin noticing you back. You think your memories belong to you, that they're safely tucked away in some internal vault, a chronological museum of your life. You imagine each memory has a place, a date, a label. But what if memory doesn't archive? What if it reflects? What if your memories aren't stored in time, but shaped by the mirrors you hold up to them? Sit with this. When you remember something, you're not replaying the past. You're re-experiencing a version of it. Not the original, but a reflection that mutates ever so slightly with each gaze. And each time you recall it, the mirror fogs a little more. Not because time erases truth, but because mirrors were never meant to be permanent. They bend light, they shimmer, they adapt to the angle you look from. What if memory isn't something you carry? What if it's something that carries you? Think of the last memory that hit you out of nowhere. A scent, a laugh, a place. You weren't planning to recall it. It rose up uninvited, like a ghost. Why? Maybe it wasn't you remembering. Maybe the memory was reflecting back on you. Not a flash from the past, but a signal across mirrors. A moment that chose to resurface because something in the now resembled it. This would mean that memory isn't backward. It's everywhere. It hovers, waiting for resonance. A familiar shape, a glance, a fragment of music that opens a mirror and calls you through it. And once you're inside that mirror, time folds. You might smell the hospital room where your sibling was born. You might hear the exact pitch of your father's voice saying your name when you were 7. It doesn't feel like a file you pulled from a drawer. It feels alive, vivid, present, like it never left. Because maybe it didn't. You're taught that memory is fragile. But it's not. It's fluid. What's fragile is your grip on its shape. You remember something one way, then years later someone else, your mother, a friend, a photo, presents another version, and suddenly yours shatters. You thought your memory was the truth, but it was a mirror shaped by where you were standing, how much light there was, how broken the glass might have been at the time. Here's the haunting part. Your memory of something might not be yours at all. It might be a reflection of a reflection. Your mother told you that story. Your teacher praised that moment, and now it's yours, or so you think. But whose eyes was it first seen through? Whose tone was it first shaped by? You've inherited memories like hand-me-down clothes, altered to fit. That time you remember almost drowning in the sea as a child, it might have been just a story retold so many times with such intensity that your mirror finally cracked enough to let it in. You've worn that memory long enough. It feels like your own skin now. This is where it gets stranger. What if time itself is made of memory? Not events, but reflections. And what if your identity isn't a line made of choices, but a hall of mirrors made of memories reflecting back and forth so rapidly that it creates the illusion of you moving forward? You think you're growing, evolving, but maybe you're just circling, remembering versions of yourself long enough to believe you're becoming someone new. Even your future, it's not untouched. You imagine it all the time. You reflect on it before it happens, and each time you do, you shape the mirror ahead. That vacation, that success, that conversation you rehearse before it unfolds, you're already placing the mirror in place, and when the moment arrives, it feels familiar, but not because it's fate, because you already saw it, or rather you already remembered it before it began. Your past is not behind you. Your future is not ahead of you. Both are beside you, watching, waiting to be recognized in the glint of a mirror, when your mind is still enough to notice. This is why silence feels sacred. It's not empty. It's a room full of mirrors, all slowly rotating until one catches your eye. And in that reflection you see something you forgot you knew, or something you haven't known yet but somehow recognize. Time is not moving. It's remembering. And memory isn't a storage device. It's a mirror ritual. A way your mind performs time. A performance that feels linear only because you've never dared to stop mid-scene and ask, have I already said this line before? And maybe you have. And maybe you have. In dreams, it's more obvious. Time melts. Mirrors bleed into each other. You remember things that never happened. You forget the most important parts. You see yourself from across the room. In those dreams, your brain isn't broken. It's free. Free from the illusion that time has direction. Free to reflect you in every direction at once. That's what memory truly is. Directionless perception. A mirror maze made of emotion, meaning, repetition, distortion. You're not finding the truth in memory. You're finding the angle that hurts the least or the one that helps you go on. So next time you remember something, ask yourself, is this a memory? Or is it a mirror? And if it's a mirror, who is looking back? You've always imagined the future as a place you're heading toward, somewhere far ahead, untouched, unwritten. But what if the future isn't waiting for you? What if it's watching you? Quietly, silently, like someone standing behind a one-way mirror. And every time you hesitate, every time you reflect, every time you dream, the future looks back through the glass and shifts. We're taught to think of time as forward momentum, to believe we're stepping into something that isn't here yet. But haven't you ever sensed a strange reversal? A moment where it feels like something ahead of you already knows how you'll arrive, that the path wasn't built step by step, but revealed like a photograph developing in reverse? This is not fate. This is not prophecy. It's reflection. The same way a mirror in front of you shows your face the instant you turn to it, the future might be showing you the outline of your choices the moment you become still enough to notice. You've had glimpses, haven't you? A dream that played out years later, a word you'd never heard, suddenly spoken in a room you shouldn't have been in, or that feeling so sharp it stings that you've done this before, even though it hasn't happened yet. It's not imagination. It's not coincidence. It's the future remembering you before you arrive. Think about it this way. You know what your bedroom looks like in the dark because you've seen it in the light. So even with your eyes closed, you can walk through it. What if your mind does the same with time? What if the future, your future, is already known somewhere inside you, not through data or logic, but through mirrored memory, reflected backward? Scientists call it precognition, intuition. Neurologists call it noise, the brain predicting patterns. But none of that explains the weight of it. The way certain moments arrive like déjà vu with teeth, like something reached out from ahead and pulled you into itself, not because it had to, but because you already belonged there. If time is a mirror, then maybe the future only reflects what you believe it might. Maybe that's why it seems to shift when you shift. Why the second you let go of one dream, another begins flickering into view. You aren't choosing your future. You're recognizing it. Like seeing your reflection walk up before you do. And it's not always beautiful. Sometimes the future you reflect is made of fear. Anxiety is the most powerful mirror we carry. It shows us the worst that could happen, and we stare into it like it's gospel. But if the future can reflect dread, then it can also reflect wonder, peace, stillness, possibility. The mirror doesn't judge, it only returns what you hold up to it. This means you're not a traveler moving toward the future. You're a reflection moving inside a mirrored space, where every thought echoes forward and backward, reshaping what you once called timeline. And perhaps this is why your life doesn't feel linear, why some lessons repeat, why some people return. You're not looping by mistake, you're looping because the mirror hasn't changed its angle yet. So what changes it? Attention, willingness, and sometimes surrender. Surrender. You can't force the future to arrive faster, but you can become clearer, quieter, more reflective, and in doing so, the future might respond. Not by speeding up, but by clarifying itself. Like condensation fading from a mirror. You don't wipe the image into view, you wait for the steam to lift. And maybe this is why some people seem to know things. Why they speak like they've already walked the road you're just stepping onto. Because they've learned how to reflect forward, how to align with a version of themselves that's already looking back. Not through magic, not through mystery, but through deep attention to the mirrored nature of their own awareness. Here's something to try. Next time you're standing on the edge of a decision, don't ask, what should I do? Instead, ask, what is my future self already trying to reflect back toward me? You might feel it. A quiet pull, a gentle turn of the mirror. That strange comfort you can't explain when you meet someone for the first time. That job offer you reject without knowing why. That sudden urge to write, call, leave, begin. These aren't whims, they're reflections. Timelines brushing against each other like soft glass, asking you to notice what's already noticing you. And here's the paradox. The more you notice the future watching you, the less urgent it becomes to reach it. Because you begin to realize you're already in it. You're inside a moment the future once reflected, and now it's your turn to return the gaze. So slow down. Breathe. Look around. This isn't the beginning. This isn't the end. This is the mirror in motion, bending time back into your eyes, asking one quiet question. If the future already remembers you, what will you choose to remember back? There are moments in life when something quiet happens. A chill passes through you. The room holds its breath, and you feel remembered. Not by a person, not even by yourself, but by the moment itself. It's as if the air around you knows something you haven't caught up to yet. You were never meant to be here for the first time. This moment is echoing, not from the past or the future, but from something deeper, something outside the line of time, something folding. Time doesn't always march forward. Sometimes it hums, sometimes it loops, sometimes it folds in on itself like soft fabric, making 2 points that seemed far apart suddenly rest side by side. That argument you had 3 years ago echoes into today's silence. That place you've never visited hums with your footsteps before you arrive. These aren't tricks. They're folds, hidden seams where time blurs and now becomes a nesting ground for things that shouldn't coexist, but somehow do. We don't notice the folds at first. We call them coincidence or intuition, or just a weird vibe. But these are signals, faint, curled echoes that travel sideways, not forward. Something whispered on the edge of reality, carried not in words but in timing. You might remember standing in a hallway, years ago, and hearing a sentence that didn't make sense until today. And now that memory arrives sharp and clear, folding into the now like it had been waiting all along. Or maybe you meet someone for the first time and feel the pulse of familiarity, the sensation that you've already had this conversation in another version of the moment. This is not fiction. Your brain doesn't work in straight lines. Neither does your experience. So why should time? Neuroscience tells us that the present moment isn't a single point, it's a window. Roughly 3 to 5 seconds wide. Your consciousness isn't receiving a live feed. It's blending inputs, stitching together sense and meaning into what we call now. And in that stitching, echoes sneak in. From before. From later. From versions of the now that almost happened but didn't. This is why time feels thicker sometimes. Why you wake from dreams with pieces of a different timeline lodged in your chest. Why a song can open an emotional flood you didn't realize was sitting just behind your ribs. The now isn't a clean snapshot. It's a collage, built from echoes that don't know their place, and they don't need to. Because here's the truth. The echo doesn't follow the event. It folds around it. It shapes the present before the present begins. You think your thoughts lead to actions, and your actions lead to outcomes. But what if the outcome arrives folded inside the thought? What if the echo is shaping your path before your steps even fall? Sit with that. You've always believed cause leads to effect, that A creates B, but the fold ruins that equation. It whispers that B might have curved around and influenced A, that your sorrow today might be the echo of a joy you haven't experienced yet, that the choice you regret might ripple back to forgive you before you even make it. Time doesn't ask permission to do this. It just does. Quietly, constantly, folding. Have you ever read an old diary entry and felt like it was written for you today? Or heard a child say something so strangely relevant it vibrated in your bones? These are echoes too, moments that resist their proper place and fold toward relevance, not because they're mystical, but because time isn't interested in proper. Time is interested in meaning. And meaning doesn't wait for the right moment. It folds into whatever moment is ready to carry it. This is why rituals matter. Why we revisit certain places or rewatch the same film on the same day each year. Not for nostalgia, but for echoes, for the fold to open again. We don't just remember, we mirror ourselves, reflect ourselves, return to versions of us that were never really gone, just paused, waiting for the now to bend around them. And when it does, when you catch the echo mid-fold, it doesn't feel like magic. It feels like clarity, like standing in front of a mirror and realizing the face looking back isn't you from today or yesterday, but you from always. So what should you do with these folds? Well, nothing. That's the trap. You can't force them, you can't schedule them, you can only notice them, quietly, with reverence, like watching two mirrors reflect each other into infinity. And when the fold comes, when the past speaks in present tense, or the future whispers through coincidence, just listen. Don't try to trace the source. Echoes are meant to ripple, not resolve. Because in the end, time doesn't need to move. It needs to mirror. And the fold is how it does that, how it hands you pieces of your life out of order, not as a puzzle, but as a reminder. You were never meant to understand time. You were meant to feel its reflection in every echo, in every fold, in every now. You press the switch and the light turns on. Simple, right? Action causes reaction. That's how we were taught the world works. You do something, and something happens. Cause first, effect second. But what if that's not always true? What if in some mirrored corner of reality, the effect is already happening and the cause is only pretending to lead? You've probably felt it. That strange sensation where something occurs and then you remember thinking about it. Or you say something out loud, only to realize you dreamed it the night before. You brush it off. But deep down, something lingers. A suspicion. What if the light turned on before you pressed the switch? This is the essence of time as a mirror. It doesn't reflect only what's behind you. Sometimes it reflects what's ahead, folding it backward, letting the echo arrive before the source. That's not science fiction. It's something scientists themselves have begun to observe. Phenomena where the result seems to influence what comes before it. They call it retrocausality, a big word for something you've already experienced in small ways. Let's break this open. Think about anticipation, the way your body sometimes reacts before you're aware of danger. Your heart speeds up before your eyes register the threat. Or how you might walk into a room and feel tension before anyone says a word, as if your body remembered something it hadn't been told yet. Now take that further. What if your decisions, your conscious choices, are already echoing through your system before your mind catches up? Neuroscientific experiments have shown that your brain sometimes prepares for action seconds before you believe you've made a decision, like a mirror already bending toward the outcome before you raise your hand. But if that's true, what's really in charge? We believe we're driving the story, that our choices shape our lives like stepping stones laid by our own will. But time as mirror doesn't care for that illusion. It suggests that maybe the choice, the effect, is reflecting itself backward, influencing your thoughts, nudging your logic, planting emotions, until finally the decision appears. But it was never yours alone. It was a reflection pulling the strings. And here's the unsettling part. This doesn't just apply to small actions. It applies to identity. Who you believe you are may be shaped less by your past and more by the future you're already walking toward. You feel shame today, not just because of something that happened, but because the version of you that's unfolding won't allow it to go unnoticed. You feel drawn to a career, a place, a person, not because of history, but because your mirrored future is already echoing through the glass. It's not just backwards, it's inside out. This is why we reframe trauma, why we retell stories. We're not just interpreting what happened, we're reshaping the meaning based on where we are now. The effect is altering the cause. You were betrayed. Years later, you see it as liberation. Was it a betrayal, or was it always something else, waiting for the mirror to angle just right? And isn't that how memory works too? A terrible day becomes nostalgic. A forgotten failure becomes the seed of confidence. The effect, how you feel now, travels back and rewrites the cause. Reversed cause and effect doesn't mean chaos. It means meaning is flexible. Time isn't there to trap you. It's there to reflect what you're ready to see. Imagine your life as a mirror maze. Every time you think you've hit a wall, it's just a reflection of a moment you haven't yet understood. You turn the corner and find yourself staring into the echo of a decision you'll make tomorrow. And suddenly, today changes shape. This is why healing doesn't require going backward. Sometimes it requires standing still and letting the future ripple back into you. Letting who you're becoming shape how you remember who you were. It's also why some people feel stuck. They're staring into the wrong mirror, one reflecting guilt, fear, or false responsibility. And so the cause keeps reflecting backward, shaping a reality that feels tight, closed. But if you change the mirror, you change the reflection, and the effect ripples into the cause. So what's the takeaway? Simple. Stop thinking of time as something you push through. Start thinking of it as something that reflects through you. Your choices are not arrows, they're echoes. Your thoughts are not origins. They're intersections of countless mirrored causes and effects folded around each other, co-creating what you call a moment. You are not the author of every outcome. You are the mirror in which outcomes reflect themselves into being. So breathe. Don't force the moment. Watch it. Let the echoes find you. Let the effect arrive quietly. Then turn to face it, and you might just glimpse the cause materializing in your reflection. And if you feel like life is nudging you towards something, like something is already unfolding through you before you understand why, maybe it is. Maybe the future has already arrived, and it's reaching back for its cause. You tell yourself you're moving, that you're progressing, that life is a series of steps, forward, onward, through. But if you pause, if you really pause, you might notice something strange, something that doesn't quite line up. A sense that you've been here before, not in location, but in rhythm. That even though your surroundings change, the feeling inside each motion repeats. You're not walking a straight line. You're looping. Watch yourself. Wake up. Get dressed. Think. Speak. Apologize. Repeat. These are not new actions. They're echoes wearing fresh clothes. And the further you look into your days, the more you begin to see the spiral, subtle, coiled motion where each turn feels like progress, but curves right back into itself. We like to believe we're escaping our patterns, that we grow, evolve, transform, and to some degree we do. But if time is a mirror, then motion is the illusion that keeps us from seeing ourselves standing still, not physically, but existentially, emotionally, spiritually. We're pacing inside mirrored halls, and every step we take is reflected by the step we've already taken. You try to escape a fear by making a different choice, and yet the same feeling comes back, cloaked in new scenery. You try to grow past a relationship, and find yourself drawn to someone eerily similar. You change jobs, countries, haircuts, but the reflection in the mirror remains. Not because you failed, but because motion doesn't break loops. Recognition does. We often confuse motion for freedom. The busier we are, the less trapped we feel. But that's the trick. The more we move, the blurrier the mirrors become. We stop noticing the loops because they seem to pass by quicker, but the same thoughts haunt your silence. The same doubts return when the noise dies down. The loop doesn't care how fast you go. It waits, patiently, until your footsteps echo loud enough to be heard again. There's a strange comfort in the loop. It gives structure, predictability, a strange illusion of control. We fall into it because it's familiar. Even pain, when looped enough, becomes a kind of safety. You begin to expect it, to shape your life around it. And once you expect it, you reflect it. And this is where it deepens. The loop isn't something time does to you. It's something your mind performs within time. A ritual, a dance. The same emotion, traced again and again until it carves a groove so deep, your thoughts fall into it without resistance. But what if this isn't failure? What if it's the mirror trying to show you something you haven't faced? Not a punishment, but a message. A reflection so subtle, it takes repetition to be seen clearly. You may think you're stuck, but you're not stuck in time. You're stuck in motion. In the belief that motion will save you. It won't. It only spins the mirror faster. The image becomes blurrier, and you call it change, when really it's just momentum without awareness. Real transformation doesn't happen when you move. It happens when you see. When you stop mid-loop and ask, where have I felt this before? Not to escape it, but to understand it. And in that pause, the mirror stills, the reflection clarifies, and the loop softens its grip. This is why certain people return to your life. Not physically, but emotionally. The boss that reminds you of your father. The stranger who makes you feel like the friend you lost. The lesson you never quite mastered. These aren't accidents. They're loops, not designed to trap you, but to reveal you. And maybe that's the real design of time. Not to move us forward, but to mirror us until we recognize ourselves fully. To loop us through versions of pain, love, loss, desire, until we stop running and simply reflect. The loop isn't failure, it's invitation. So what can you do? Start by noticing your motion. Are you moving forward? Or just moving again? Is this growth? Or repetition with a new soundtrack? Look at the emotion underneath. It rarely lies. If the fear feels familiar, if the doubt tastes the same, if the thrill burns the same color, you're not in a new story. You're in a new reflection of the same one. And that's okay. Because the goal isn't to escape the loop. It's to understand it. Once seen clearly, loops dissolve. Not all at once, but slowly, gracefully, like a record finally skipping past the groove. And in that space, something else appears. Stillness. Not the stillness of paralysis, but the stillness of truth. The kind that doesn't need to move to be alive. The kind that sees all motion as ritual, and all ritual as reflection. And when you reach that stillness, you don't have to fight the loop anymore. You become the mirror. You stop being the dancer and start becoming the dance. So take one more breath. Don't try to break the cycle. Don't try to outrun the reflection. Just stand where you are. Watch your motion. Feel the loop. See the mirror. And in that gaze, something will shift. Not out there. In you. There are memories that live in the dark. Not because they're forgotten, but because they were never fully seen. You feel their edges in passing, like walking past an old mirror draped in cloth. They move when you're not looking, whisper when you're almost asleep. They don't beg to be recalled. They linger, Not in clarity, but in shadow. And here's the strangest part. Those shadows remember differently than you do. We like to believe our memories are clean, that they're snapshots stored exactly as they were. But every mirror distorts depending on where you stand. Your mind isn't a recording device, it's a storyteller. And when it reaches into the shadows, into those dim corners of time, it fills in the blanks not with truth, but with shape, with emotion, with suggestion. The shadows aren't lies, they're mirrors without light. And sometimes they remember more than you think. Have you ever suddenly recalled something you swore was gone? A smell, a fragment of music, a flicker of a hallway you once walked through as a child. It didn't reappear because you tried. It returned because the shadow shifted, because something in the present moment aligned just enough to let the light back in. Not directly, but at an angle, reflected through feeling. This is the way the deeper parts of you remember. Not in sentences, but in textures, in weight, in tension. The body remembers what the mind erases. You may not recall what was said, but your shoulders do. You may not remember who hurt you, but your breath does when you enter a similar room. The shadows of time don't forget, they just remember sideways. And that's what makes them powerful. Because sometimes, the memories that shape us the most are the ones we never name. A look, a silence, a gesture that carved itself into the reflection of who you believe you are. Not a headline moment, a shadow, small, quiet, but endlessly present. That's why certain phrases sting more than they should. Why some people feel unsafe without ever touching you. Your mind may not have the mirror fully upright, but the shadows are active. They reflect a pattern, a tone, a wound. Not to trap you, but to ask, do you see it now? Most of us are haunted not by the events themselves, but by the versions we were never allowed to reflect on properly. The feelings that were too big to hold at the time. So we locked them in the shadow room, told ourselves it didn't matter, laughed it off, grew up. But the mirror remembers, and it remembers in strange ways, in dream logic, in resistance, in sudden anger that doesn't match the moment. These are not mistakes. These are the shadows trying to find their light again, not to burn, but to be seen, to be heard, to be remembered fully. You don't have to look for them. They will find you when the timing folds just right. When someone says something innocent and your entire chest tightens. When you try to say I'm fine but your voice cracks sideways. That's a mirror cracking open, just a sliver to show you what you buried. And here's the mirror paradox. Shadows aren't the absence of truth. They're the space where truth waits. Not in facts, but in reflection, in emotion, in the body's ancient whispers. Some of your deepest growth won't come from uncovering new insights, but from turning toward these shadows with new eyes, not to correct them, not to clean them, but to let them speak in the language they remember best. Reflection, not reason. Have you ever apologized to a version of yourself you barely remember? You should try. Go back in your mind to a time when you didn't have the words, when the mirror was too fogged to show you your shape. Stand beside that shadow, say nothing, just witness. That's how you unlock the echo. That's how you change the reflection. Because once a shadow is seen clearly, it no longer needs to hide. The memory becomes yours again, not as a scar, but as a mirror you finally dusted off. And what it shows you might surprise you. Strength, resilience, a story you've been living without even realizing it. This is why we sometimes cry for no reason. Why music wrecks us when we're least expecting it. The shadows are not gone. They're just waiting for the right rhythm to enter the room, waiting for the mirrors of the present to align. And when they do, they don't want you to relive the pain. They want you to reclaim the reflection, to say, I see you now, to whisper, it wasn't your fault, to admit you were never broken, just hidden. So the next time a shadow passes through your day, a familiar ache, a reaction too sharp, a silence too deep, don't turn away. Turn inward. Because in that moment, the mirror is giving you a chance not to fix the past, but to remember it differently. And sometimes, that's all a shadow ever needed. Pause for a moment. Don't think about yesterday. Don't reach for tomorrow. Just stay here, in this very second. Now ask yourself, who is watching this moment? Is it you, or is it a version of you, watching you? The present is supposed to be solid, the only thing we truly have. But have you ever noticed how slippery it is? How it seems to drift even as you try to hold it? You sit in silence, trying to stay in the moment, and within seconds you're outside it, watching it from a distance, narrating it, analyzing it, folding it into memory before it's even finished happening. That's because the present doesn't just happen. It reflects itself. You're not simply living it. You're watching it as it unfolds, and that watcher, the quiet observer inside you, is shaping the moment just by witnessing it, like a mirror that reflects itself again and again, until you're not sure what's real anymore, the image or the observation of the image. There is a term in quantum physics, the observer effect. It means the act of observing something changes the thing itself. It's not metaphor, it's measurable. Tiny particles behave differently when they're being watched. Why? Because observation introduces awareness, and awareness reshapes the field. Now apply that to your life. Every time you look at the present, you change it. You don't just experience the moment, you narrate it. You judge it. You worry about it. You compare it to what just happened, or what should come next. Your observation stacks mirrors inside the now, and the more you watch, the more layers appear. That's why meditation feels impossible at first. You're told to focus on your breath, but then you start thinking about the thought of focusing. You become aware of your awareness, one mirror facing another, and suddenly you're not breathing. You're watching yourself watch yourself breathe. This is the loop. This is why the present so often escapes you. Because the very act of catching it puts you one step away from it. But what if that isn't a problem? What if it's the design? Maybe the present is not a place to be trapped in. Maybe it's a place to be reflected through, like a beam of light caught between two mirrors, bouncing infinitely. You think you're experiencing time, but perhaps you're just witnessing a stream of reflections, endlessly folding themselves inward, trying to show you something you haven't yet understood. The present watches itself, because it's the only way it can exist. Think about this. The moment you name a feeling, it's no longer just sensation. It becomes a thought. You say, "I'm anxious," and suddenly you're observing yourself. The rawness of it fades. You're no longer in it, you're next to it, watching. And this is how we survive, by stepping outside ourselves, sometimes without knowing it, because being inside everything at once would be too much. So we watch, we split, we reflect. But what if the self that's watching you right now, the quiet, wordless you beneath the thoughts, is not separate? What if it's the mirror, not your eyes, not your memories, just presence, reflecting presence? This would mean that reality isn't passing you by. It's holding you, watching itself through you. That tree outside your window? You see it. But more importantly, you're aware that you're seeing it. The smell of your coffee? You're not just smelling it, you're remembering how that smell felt last week, and how it might feel next time. Layers, mirrors, and all of it happens inside what you call now. But now is not a dot, it's a dimension. A room of reflections folding over each other, past blending into future, thought blending into sensation, all witnessed by something inside you that has no name, no voice, no agenda, just quiet presence, the present watching itself. That's why time slows when you're in awe, why moments stretch when you fall in love, why silence deepens when you're grieving. Because the mirrors align, you stop running ahead or falling behind, and suddenly you're not watching the present anymore, you are the present, whole, unfolded. So why does it feel so rare? Because we're trained to escape it. Every device, every notification, every plan pulls us into some other moment. We're taught to live slightly ahead of ourselves, to narrate instead of exist, to capture instead of reflect. And in doing so, we trade the richness of presence for the thinness of anticipation. But you can return. You don't need to close your eyes or empty your thoughts. Just notice, right now, as you listen, who is listening? Not just the mind, not just the ears, but the awareness behind it. The reflection of this very second folding into itself, seen from the inside. That's where the real mirror is. Not in memory, not in imagination, but in the moment that watches you, watching it. There are thoughts that feel natural, like they belong to you. And then there are thoughts that arrive crooked. They enter sideways like reflections seen in a warped mirror. You don't know where they came from. You don't even know if they're yours, but they're here, and they bend you. You sit at your desk, trying to focus, but the thought pulls your attention. A worry, a memory, a flash of someone's face. You didn't invite it. It bent the moment. It bent you. And just like that, You're no longer in the now. You're inside a mirror you didn't know was there. This is what thought does inside time. It curves. It loops. It doesn't walk in a straight line. Thought moves like light inside mirrors, bouncing, twisting, splitting. What you think is linear reasoning might actually be a cascade of distorted reflections. And the mind? The mind is the room where these mirrors hang. When you believe a thought, really believe it, it becomes the shape of the mirror you see everything through. I'm not good enough. They'll leave me. I have to be in control. These aren't just ideas. They're bent mirrors. And once you look into them, they start reflecting themselves in everything you experience. A sentence from a stranger, a delay in traffic, an unanswered message, they all bounce back that original thought, not because it's true, but because the mirror was tilted just right. You think you're seeing the world clearly, but you're seeing it through mental glass, shaped by experience, emotion, memory. And glass, once bent, doesn't show you what's there. It shows you what you believe is there. Have you ever looked into a funhouse mirror? It doesn't lie maliciously. It simply bends light. The image it shows isn't false. It's distorted. And that's what certain thoughts do. They don't deceive you with facts. They distort you with angles. Angles formed long ago, maybe by a parent's tone, a teacher's disapproval, a breakup you never fully understood. Each event left a bend in your mirror. And now, without knowing it, you see yourself and the world through those curves. But here's the thing. Mirrors can change. Not by smashing them. Not by denying the reflection. But by noticing the angle. That's where the transformation begins. Start here. Pick a thought that's been haunting you. Maybe it whispers when you fail, or screams when you're alone. Hold it gently. Don't argue with it. Don't obey it. Just look at it, and ask, what mirror is this thought reflecting from? Not is it true, but what shape does this reflection have? Does it stretch reality? Shrink your worth? Multiply your fears? Good. Now you're seeing the bend. Now imagine stepping slightly to the side, not to escape it, but to find a new angle, a softer light, a different reflection. You'll notice the thought loses its grip. It doesn't vanish, but it loosens, because you stopped looking at it head-on. You started seeing the mirror behind it. That's the secret. Thoughts aren't problems, they're portals. Each one invites you to notice how your inner world is shaped, how your history folds into your perception, how your belief becomes the frame that bends every incoming moment. And once you see this, really see it, the whole architecture of time begins to shift. You're no longer pulled by every passing idea. You become the stillness behind the glass, the one who notices the bend. That's how freedom starts. Not by thinking better thoughts, by becoming the mirror that chooses how to reflect. Of course, this isn't easy. Some mirrors were bent decades ago. Some were handed to you by people you trusted. Some feel permanent, but they're not. Mirrors are fragile. Even belief can crack when light enters at the right angle. A new experience, a moment of compassion, a single phrase that lands in just the right place, and suddenly, the old reflection shatters. This is why healing often feels like remembering something you forgot. Because it's not always about learning new truths. It's about noticing which mirrors never belonged to you in the first place. You'll know you're bending less when the world stops reflecting so much fear, when silence feels less like emptiness and more like clarity, when a harsh thought arises, and instead of reacting, you feel a small pause, a breath between stimulus and spiral. That's the mirror stabilizing. That's the reflection softening. And eventually, something beautiful happens. You stop believing every thought, not because they're wrong, but because you know they're mirrors. Temporary, reflective, optional. You can still use them. You can still think, plan, create. But now, you're choosing your angles. You're curating the glass. You're bending thought in your own direction, rather than being bent by it. So the next time a thought arrives, one that feels sharp or cruel or too loud, don't ask if it's true. Ask what kind of mirror it came from. And then decide, do I want to see myself through this? Because once you learn to bend the mirror stops bending you. It's easy to miss. In fact, you almost always do. Between each moment, between the inhale and the exhale, between the blink and the thought, there is something strange, something quiet. Not absence, not nothing, but a kind of stillness, a pause the world never announces. It doesn't wave at you or ask to be noticed. It simply waits, patiently, just beneath the noise. This is the stillness between moments. And it might be the only place where time isn't distorted, bent, or reflected, where time doesn't stretch forward or fold back, where time simply isn't. You've felt it before, even if you didn't know how to name it. That strange silence just after someone finishes speaking, but before you respond. The way the world holds its breath after a piece of music ends. The pause between lightning and thunder. These are not empty. These are dense, heavy with something you can't touch, as if reality itself is recalibrating, checking its own reflection before it moves again. In a world addicted to motion, stillness feels like a glitch. We rush to fill it. We talk through it, scroll past it. But what if that stillness is the clearest mirror of all? What if it's the only place where you can see without distortion? See, not with your eyes, but with your presence. When you pause long enough to notice the stillness between moments, you start to realize something unsettling. Time isn't continuous. It's not one flowing ribbon. It's a sequence of frames, stitched together by your mind, like a film reel, playing so fast you mistake it for motion. But between each frame, there's darkness. And in that darkness there is stillness. And in that stillness, something watches. You. Not your thoughts, not your roles or names or timelines, just the awareness that sees without needing to name or judge or change. The part of you that doesn't move, even when everything else does. The witness behind the mirror. This stillness is not passive, it's generative. It's the soil from which all perception grows. Without it, moments wouldn't exist. There would be no contrast, no edge, no beginning or end, just blur. Stillness gives shape to motion, just like silence gives shape to sound. And yet, most people fear it. Because in the stillness, there's no distraction, no storyline. Just you raw, mirrorless, unfiltered. That's why boredom feels unbearable. That's why waiting makes your skin itch. It's not the absence of stimulation you fear, it's the presence of yourself. The way stillness reflects back everything you've been trying to outrun. But here's the twist. If you stop resisting the stillness, if you stop filling it with thoughts and movement, something begins to unfold. Slowly, gently, like a reflection that wasn't visible until the water settled. You begin to feel time differently, not as a ticking clock or an endless forward rush, but as something more fluid, almost circular. You start to realize that many of your decisions aren't made in the heat of thinking. They rise up from that silent space already formed, waiting to be noticed. Intuition lives there. So does creativity. So does truth. Not the kind of truth you argue about. The kind that sits silently in your chest and doesn't need to be explained. The kind that feels like a home you forgot you built. You don't find it by thinking harder. You find it by listening to the pause between the notes. And the more time you spend with the stillness, the more you start to realize that every moment in your life has been wrapped in it. Every joy, every pain, every decision, surrounded by quiet before and after. You just never stop to feel it. Until now. Right now, this is the mirror you've been avoiding. Not because it's harsh, but because it doesn't reflect your story. It reflects your presence. There's nothing to perform in stillness. And nothing to control. But only to witness. And the longer you stay in that space, the more time begins to shift. Minutes stretch, thoughts soften. The boundary between past and future begins to dissolve. You are no longer preparing or remembering. You are just being. And that being is more than enough. This is where meditation tries to take you. Where art and grief and love all lead you. Not to a new idea, but to the absence of noise. To the mirror beneath the mirrors. Stillness is not the opposite of time. It's the doorway through it. So take a breath. Feel the space between the inhale and the exhale. Linger there. Let it hold you. You don't need to achieve anything here. Just remain. The moment will move again soon. The world will call you back. But for now, stay. Because in this stillness, this quiet between echoes, time lets go. And in that release you begin to remember what you were before the story started. Just awareness. Just presence. Just the mirror, finally resting. There's a strange idea. Quiet, unsettling. That time may not be something outside of you, ticking forward like a machine. It might be something inside of you, imitating you, following the shape of your attention, reflecting the way your awareness moves, not in hours but in patterns. You wake up late on a weekend, and suddenly 3 hours vanish like smoke. Another day, you wait for a phone call, and each minute stretches until it aches. Same clock, same minutes, but entirely different experiences. Why? Because time isn't constant. It bends, it swells, it shrinks. Not because of physics, but because of you. Time imitates awareness. Where you place your attention, time follows. When you're lost in thought, time disappears. When you're fully present, time expands. It's not just perception, it's architecture. The moment stretches or contracts based on the weight of your noticing. Your awareness becomes the mirror that gives shape to the reflection called time. And here's the deeper strangeness. Time only seems to exist when you're looking at it. Try this. Think of your childhood, not the story, the feeling. Does it feel like another life, or does it flicker beside you, like a dream you just woke from? That's not just memory, that's your awareness curving. It doesn't follow the rules. It doesn't travel in a line. It leaps, it folds, it reflects, and time follows. There's a reason why the most sacred moments in life feel timeless. Birth, death, falling in love, losing something precious. In those moments, your awareness widens so much that time can't keep up. It gets quiet. It hums in the background, because your presence is too full, too awake, too still. And in contrast, there are days that blur into each other, routines that numb your perception until time becomes a fog. You blink, and a week is gone. Why? Because your awareness was fragmented, unanchored. Time had nothing to imitate but your distraction. It's not that time was wasted, it was just unnoticed. And anything unnoticed leaves no trail. This means you're not simply in time, you are co-creating it. Every second you live is being sculpted by the shape of your attention. You can stretch it, compress it, revisit it, rewrite it, not with force, but with presence. When you slow down, time slows down. When you notice deeply, time notices you back. It's why silence can feel so loud, why nature resets your sense of scale, why watching a candle flicker can make 5 minutes feel like an hour, and why scrolling through your phone can make an hour feel like 5 minutes that never really happened. The quality of time is the quality of your awareness. So what does this mean for you? It means you don't need more time. You need more presence. You don't need to chase the future or fix the past. You need to anchor yourself so completely in the now that time has no choice but to unfold gently, respectfully around you. And when that happens, something incredible reveals itself. You begin to see that the events of your life, the so-called timeline, have always been shaped less by what happened and more by how you were aware of it. The same event can be remembered as trauma or transformation. A single moment can become a curse or a catalyst, and the only difference is the mirror you were holding at the time. That mirror is your awareness. And time has been copying it since the very beginning. This also explains why some people seem to live fuller lives. Even with the same number of years, they're not luckier, they're simply more aware, they notice more, they reflect more. Their moments are layered, textured, vivid, because their mirror is polished, open, awake, and you can become that too. You don't need to meditate in a forest or abandon the world. You just need to begin noticing. One breath at a time, one step at a time. Start small. Feel the weight of your body in the chair. Hear the silence between your thoughts. Watch the way your awareness moves and how time shifts in response. That's where your power lives. Not in controlling time, but in realizing that time has been echoing you all along. So the next time you feel rushed, panicked, lost in the blur of days, ask yourself, where is my attention? Because wherever that is, that's where time is taking its shape. And if you shift your awareness, even slightly, you shift the mirror, you shift the moment, you shift the life unfolding around you. Not because you slowed down the clock, but because you finally saw that time was only ever following your reflection. There are moments when you catch yourself from the outside, like looking through a window and watching a version of you that isn't quite you. Maybe it's during an argument, or in a photograph, or in the strange silence after you say something you didn't mean, and for a breathless second, you wonder, who is that? This is the experience of glass, thin, invisible, always present, separating you from yourself. We often speak of becoming ourselves, like there's a single version of who we are waiting to be unlocked. But what if the self you are, the self you were, and the self you're becoming are all staring at each other through layers of glass, not merging, not linear, just watching? You are not a single identity. You are a hall of reflections. Each version of you, past, present, imagined, exists like a silhouette behind mirrored glass, and you catch glimpses when the light shifts just right. That memory of who you were at 17? That's not just nostalgia. That's a version of you still alive in a sealed room behind your current awareness. You can't touch them, but they're there watching, hoping you'll remember what they forgot. The future you. They're behind another panel. You sense them sometimes. In dreams, in desires that seem too big for the life you're living now. You try to reach them through goals, resolutions, visions, but it always feels like there's something in between, something smooth and cold. That's the glass. The glass between selves. You don't notice it until you press against it, when the moment gets too close, too real, and you feel the resistance. The part of you that still holds back, the hesitation to change, the voice that whispers, "That's not me." But what if it is? What if every self you've ever been and ever will be is real, and the only reason you can't meet them fully is because the mirror hasn't aligned? In psychology, they talk about self-concept and ideal self. The person you think you are, and the person you wish you could be. But that model is too clean, too flat. Because the truth is messier. Your sense of self isn't two boxes. It's hundreds of mirrors, overlapping, reflecting, sometimes contradicting. That's why you feel split. Why you can believe in yourself and doubt yourself in the same hour. Why you can crave change and fear it just as deeply. You're not inconsistent. You're multidimensional. Each version of you has its own language, its own glass, its own light. And sometimes they get close. You catch a glimpse of your braver self. The one who says what they mean. The one who leaves when it's time. The one who forgives. But it doesn't last, because you're still behind the glass, watching that version like a movie you haven't stepped into. But here's the secret. The glass isn't locked. It's only reflective. It shows you what you're almost ready to become. The fear you feel before stepping forward. That's just the resistance of breaking through the surface, of moving from reflection to embodiment. And the cracks begin when you become still. When you stop performing the self you think you're supposed to be, and start listening to the self behind the mirror, the quiet one, the forgotten one, the one that never needed to prove anything. You've seen them before, in your childhood drawings, in journal entries you'll never show anyone, in the version of you who danced alone in a room, or spoke to the stars, or wept without asking why. That self never left. They're just behind the glass. And then there are the selves you've abandoned, the ones you couldn't carry, the one who trusted the wrong person, the one who couldn't get out of bed, the one who laughed too loudly, or loved too recklessly, or stayed too long. You treat them like strangers, ashamed, hidden, muted. But they're not gone, they're waiting, pressed against the other side of the mirror, whispering, "Please don't forget that I was real too." And that's the hardest truth to hold. The glass doesn't just separate you from who you could be. It separates you from who you were, and who you've refused to forgive. You don't need to become someone new. You need to turn toward the mirror and make eye contact with all the selves you've left behind. Not to fix them, not to erase them, but to welcome them back into the present. Because integration isn't a performance. It's a reflection. It's standing before the glass and saying, "I see you. I remember you. You are still part of me." And in that seeing, the glass begins to shimmer. Not with clarity, but with compassion. You realize you are not broken. You are not late. You are not stuck. You're simply reflecting. Slowly, gently, fully. And maybe, just maybe, all the selves behind the glass have been watching you this whole time, waiting for the moment you'd remember. You've never been alone in the mirror. In the mirror, you look at a clock and think you understand time. The seconds tick forward. The minutes build into hours. The day grows and fades like a tide. Time, you tell yourself, is measured, managed, predictable. But that's only the part you can track, the part with numbers. There's another side to time, one the clock can't see. It's the moment when a single second feels like a lifetime. When someone touches your hand, and the world slows down so much you can feel your heartbeat behind your eyes. Or the moment when 3 hours vanish into nothing while you're staring out the window, not thinking at all. Time didn't behave, because it wasn't being watched by the clock. The clock doesn't measure your life, it records its surface. But time, Real time lives in the unmeasured places, the in-betweens, the inner echoes, the places where awareness doesn't follow the rules. When you fall in love, time doesn't tick, it shimmers. When you grieve, time doesn't move, it folds. When you create, time doesn't count, it breathes. And when you reflect, time doesn't pass, it looks back. The clock wasn't built for any of this. It can't see the places inside you where time doesn't align with seconds or schedules. It can't track the time you spend waiting in silence, or healing from something no one saw, or learning to forgive a version of yourself you barely remember. But you feel that time, deeply. That's why some years are unforgettable, while others blur into nothing. It's not the events, it's the weight of awareness, the quality of noticing, the depth of reflection. Clocks can only count what is shallow, but your soul lives in deep time. There's a reason memories don't arrive in order, why dreams collapse timelines, why emotions take longer than logic to process. You're not malfunctioning, you're simply experiencing the mirror side of time, the part that bends toward meaning instead of measurement. This is why birthdays and anniversaries feel both too big and too small, why waiting for news stretches hours into oceans, why hearing a certain voice can collapse a decade into one breath. You exist inside rhythms the clock cannot hold, and the more you rely on the clock to understand yourself, the more you forget this. You begin to think you're late, or behind, or wasting time, as if the only meaningful way to live is to be on schedule. But what if you are exactly where you're meant to be? Not on the clock's timeline, but on your own. Because maybe the healing that took you 5 years couldn't have happened in 4. Maybe the lesson that clicked today needed hundreds of days to prepare the mirror. Maybe the delay wasn't a punishment, but a pause between mirrors aligning. You don't live by hours, you live by echoes. You don't grow by dates, you grow by reflections. And clocks can't measure that. And they can't see the space you've made for peace, the courage it takes to rest, the quiet transformation happening in the still parts of your life. To the clock, these are invisible. But to the mirror, they are everything. That's why presence matters. Not because it makes you more productive, but because it helps you feel the kind of time that lives underneath time. The kind that whispers, this moment is enough, you are enough. And when you feel that, even for a breath, time stops being a race. It becomes a mirror, one that shows you not how much you've done, but how fully you've lived. So if you ever feel like life is passing you by, try asking a different question. Not what time is it, but what can the clock not see right now? Maybe it's the way your breath softens after a difficult day. Maybe it's the forgiveness blooming inside a broken relationship. Maybe it's the dream you haven't spoken aloud yet, but carry like a flame. These things are real. More real than most of what the calendar holds, and the mirror sees them even when the world doesn't. So let the clock keep ticking, but don't let it define you, because the deepest parts of you are not scheduled, they're reflected, and somewhere between 2 ticks, in a space the clock can't touch, you'll find yourself not counting time, but becoming it. You stand in front of the mirror and see your own face, or at least that's what you believe, but stare a little longer and things begin to shift. You notice the fatigue beneath your eyes, the hesitation in your mouth, a flicker of someone else behind your own expression. You blink, and it's gone. But for a moment you weren't sure who you were looking at. Because sometimes, your reflection hides more than it reveals. Sometimes, it shows you all the faces you've worn, and all the ones you've buried. You've been many people in this life. Some you chose, some were chosen for you. The child who laughed too loudly, the teenager who pretended not to care, the friend who always held it together, the stranger who cried in the bathroom and didn't know why. These versions don't disappear, they stay, pressed like photographs against the glass, not shouting, just watching, waiting to be seen again. And it's not just your own face in there. You carry others too, a parent's disapproval, a lover's disappointment, the teacher who told you what you could never be. Their words formed angles in your mirror, their faces left imprints. Now when you look at yourself, you sometimes see them not literally, but subtly. In your posture, your tone, your fear. You think you're seeing yourself clearly, but the reflection is layered. You're looking through fingerprints, through echoes, through time. This is why self-image feels so unstable. Why some days you feel radiant and others you can't meet your own gaze. The mirror is reflecting not just your present self, but the history of all the selves you've collected, willingly or not. Sometimes you adopt a face for safety. You smile when you're falling apart. You play confident while doubting everything, and eventually you forget where the mask ends, and you begin. The face becomes familiar. It fits, but it's not yours. It was borrowed, crafted, inherited. That's what makes the mirror so deceptive. It always shows a face, but not always your face. The real one, the unreflected self, can't be seen with eyes. It lives underneath the roles, the performances, the rehearsed expressions. It doesn't need to be captured. It needs to be remembered. And to remember it, you must get close enough to see the other faces, the ones you've hidden, the ones you've feared, the ones that surface when you're alone in the dark, unfiltered by performance. They're not there to hurt you. They're waiting to be included. Because healing isn't about finding the right face. It's about making peace with every version that once had to protect you. Even the ones that lied. Even the ones that failed. Especially the ones that were never allowed to speak. Have you ever surprised yourself in the mirror? Maybe after crying, or laughing too hard, or returning from a long journey. There's a moment of recognition or confusion, where you see a face you didn't expect. That's a hidden self coming forward, a part of you that was too quiet for too long. And the mirror doesn't lie in that moment. It reveals, but only if you're willing to see. Most people aren't. They rush past the mirror, glance instead of gaze, because the reflection asks questions they aren't ready to answer. Who did you become to survive? Whose pain are you still wearing? What version of yourself never got a goodbye? You don't need to answer all of them now. You just need to pause, to stare long enough that the reflection softens and the masks begin to peel, to realize that behind every face you've shown the world, there's a quieter one, watching, waiting, whole. The mirror isn't there to judge you. It's there to reunite you, to return you to the face that existed before the world started shaping you. That face may not be polished. It may not be understood, but it's real, and it's yours. So next time you look into the mirror, don't rush, don't correct, just see, notice what's familiar, and then notice what isn't. Because sometimes the reflection that feels least like you is the one you've been missing all along. You think this moment is singular, that it's happening only once, right now, never to be repeated. That's what we're taught. Time moves forward, events unfold, and each second is unique. But what if that's not entirely true? What if every moment has a twin, hidden somewhere in the folds of time, quietly mirroring this one? Not a repetition, a reflection. You felt it. You walk into a room you've never entered, and feel like you've been there before. Not quite déjà vu, something softer, like a moment that isn't repeating, but aligning. A twin memory brushing against this one. And for a second, time feels layered. This isn't fiction. This is how mirrors behave. Every reflection has a counterpart. Light bounces, angles shift, and images duplicate. Why should time behave differently? What if for every now there's another now, adjacent, inverted, waiting? The ancient philosophers spoke of recurrence, of time spiraling instead of marching, of events not repeating identically, but echoing, with slight variation, like ripples across water. And maybe it's not just big events that do this. Maybe each tiny moment, each glance, each breath, has another version of itself, happening elsewhere in the mirror. You think you made a choice 5 years ago that changed everything. But what if in some hidden fold of time, the twin of that choice is happening again right now in a different form, in a different context, with the same emotional signature? You don't recognize it because it looks different, but the core is the same. That's why certain moments haunt you. Not because they're unfinished, but because their twin is trying to get your attention. A new argument that feels like an old one. A stranger's kindness that brings tears you didn't know were waiting. The way a song hits you differently one night, and you suddenly remember the version of yourself that first heard it. These aren't coincidences. They're alignments. Mirrors within time, and they show up most clearly when you're still. When your awareness slows enough to notice the pattern beneath the noise, that's when the twin moment appears. Not with logic, but with resonance. You don't need to understand it to feel it. You just know, I've been here before. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually, internally. And that knowing changes the moment. It deepens it. You start to feel less scattered, less random, because suddenly, time isn't a stream dragging you forward. It's a mirror reflecting themes, shapes, echoes, inviting you to notice the symmetry. This is why healing takes the shape of spirals. You think you're done with a lesson, only to find it again years later, different people, different setting, same core. At first it feels like failure, but it's not. It's the twin arriving, not to punish, but to complete the mirror, to let you hold both versions of the moment side by side. In doing so, something opens. You begin to see time not as distance, but as dimension. Not as separation, but as relationship. This is also why some moments feel bigger than they should. A goodbye that carries more weight than it seems. A first meeting that feels ancient. It's not the surface, it's the reflection, the twin moment, the echo reuniting with itself. You are not walking through a series of disconnected seconds. You are navigating a mirrored hall of moments, and some of them come in pairs. So what does this mean? It means that right now, as you breathe, listen, sit with this thought. You may be inside a mirrored moment, one that holds the energy of another, one that gives you a second chance to respond differently, to notice what you missed the first time, to close the loop. It means that time isn't just movement, it's memory. Not of the past, but of meaning. And meaning doesn't need chronology, it needs reflection. That's why you grieve people who are still alive, why you long for moments that never happened, why you feel the echo of something unspoken years after the words were swallowed. You're not broken, you're mirrored. You're holding more than one version of each moment. The one that happened, the one that might have happened, and the one that's happening again right now in disguise. And if you slow down, you can feel them all. This isn't superstition. This is awareness. This is presence sharpened into perception. You begin to move through time like a listener instead of a chaser. You stop forcing closure. You stop fearing repetition. Because you realize, the moments that return are not loops to escape, but mirrors to understand. So if you feel like something old is resurfacing, pay attention. If a memory knocks softly, open the door. If a new moment carries an old flavor, taste it fully, because it may be your chance to complete a reflection, to greet a twin you didn't know you were still waiting for. You walk down the street and feel eyes on you. Not from a person, not from a window, but from the moment itself, like the air has turned its gaze inward, like the world is watching. But it's not paranoia, it's not ego. It's the mirror again. Only this time, it's not showing your reflection, it's being your reflection. The world in its stillness begins to look back. We don't often think of reality as conscious. We say the world doesn't care, as if existence is neutral, cold, detached. But have you noticed how sometimes in your quietest, most unguarded moments, reality seems to respond? You think a thought, and suddenly the song playing in the cafe matches it. You wonder about someone, and they call you. You feel something shifting inside, and the weather mirrors it. Not coincidences, reflections. A world that is not separate, but responsive. A mirror that doesn't just show you, it studies you. When time is linear, the world is a background scenery on your path. But when time is a mirror, the world becomes part of your interior. It reflects what you believe. It returns what you expect. It listens, even when you're silent. That's why certain spaces feel sacred. Why some rooms make you whisper. Why the forest feels alive, or the desert feels like it's waiting. These are not just moods. They're mirrors. Quiet ones. Old ones. They don't look at you like humans do. They look through you. And when you slow down enough to feel it, something shifts. You stop being the center. You stop being the observer. And for a moment, the world takes your place. It becomes the one seeing, the one asking questions. And you, small, soft, reflective, become the scene. This is not about magic. It's about presence. When your awareness becomes still enough, reality doesn't change, but it begins to participate. The ancient mystics knew this. They called it the living presence of the universe. They weren't speaking poetically. They were naming something real. The sense that when you listen deeply enough, something listens back. Not a deity, not a force, just the world. Looking, and maybe it always was. When a baby laughs at nothing, are they alone? Or is the moment laughing too? When a monk sits in silence and weeps for no reason, is he mourning? Or has the world turned inward to feel with him? What if every moment contains a gaze, not from a face, but from time itself. What if every space you enter is already holding your reflection, waiting for you to arrive and complete it? You've felt this in art, in music, in long drives through nowhere. That sense that the world is not passive, not indifferent, but mirrored, echoing your questions back through scenery, timing, and rhythm. Even pain reflects. You suffer, and the world seems to dim. You heal, and it brightens. But the world isn't changing. Your reflection in it is. You are tinting the mirror without realizing it. That's why self-awareness feels like the world is changing. Because it is. Not objectively. Reflectively. You smile more. People respond differently. You soften. The world becomes safer. Not because it was dangerous, but because you were carrying jagged reflections. And as those change, so does the world that looks back. But this is delicate. It's not about control. You don't manipulate reality like a puppet. You participate in it like a duet. You move, it responds. You hide, it dims. You open, it opens with you. So how do you live inside a world that watches? Gently. You begin to speak not just to people, but to the moment. You greet silence as a presence, not an absence. You treat empty streets like sanctuaries. You notice how the wind carries your thoughts, how the light arrives when you least expect it, how reality seems to lean in when you finally stop trying to escape it. And the more you do this, the more your life stops feeling like something happening to you, and starts feeling like something happening with you. A conversation, a mirror, a world that is not background, but partner. And maybe, just maybe, you've never really been alone in a room, because the moment you walk in, the world begins watching. You feel it every day, the subtle pull, the forward drift. You wake up, plan your day, chase goals, mark milestones. Time moves forward, and so must you. That's the rule, right? But what if it's an illusion? What if forward is just the story your mind tells itself to avoid the truth? That you're not actually going anywhere? That all this motion is just the reflection of movement, not movement itself? You scroll through photos, watch the years stack up, see people change, and believe it means progress. But deep down, something doesn't line up. Despite all that time passing, some feelings haven't. Some patterns haven't. Some parts of you are still standing exactly where they were years ago, whispering quietly through all the noise of motion. You didn't move, you just watched the mirror spin. You try to change jobs, cities, partners, habits, and for a while it feels like you're sprinting towards something new. But slowly, that same old restlessness leaks back in. The same fear, the same emptiness, the same loop. Why? Because you weren't moving forward. You were moving in a circle, inside a mirrored room. The illusion isn't that time passes. It does. The illusion is that you're being carried with it. That by simply existing in the river, you're being transformed. But growth doesn't happen by drifting. It happens by noticing. And most people are too distracted by the idea of what's next to ask the quieter question, where am I actually going? When time is seen as a mirror, not a line, the illusion begins to crack. You stop asking, how far have I come? And start asking, what keeps returning? Because in mirrors, progress isn't measured by distance. It's measured by depth, by clarity, by reflection. You may have aged, but are you more present? You may have moved, but are you more honest? You may have succeeded, but are you more whole? The story of forward motion is a comforting one. It gives the illusion of escape. That was then, you say. This is now. But if you peel back the surface, you'll often find that now is just a shinier version of then. The same fears in different clothes, the same roles with new faces. That's why change feels exhausting. Because you're not actually evolving. You're rearranging reflections, trying to outpace what can only be healed by stillness. And stillness terrifies you. It feels like stopping, like failure, like being left behind. But what if stillness is the only place where real movement begins? What if forward is a distraction from inward? There's a reason why wisdom traditions across cultures and centuries speak of stillness, silence, surrender, not as resignation, but as alignment. Because only when the mirrors stop spinning can you finally see what's been reflecting back all along. You think you're moving forward because your calendar changes, your body ages, the world spins, but real movement is internal. A shift in how you relate to time, to memory, to identity. And that kind of movement doesn't look like achievement. It looks like realization. You don't grow by adding more steps. Or you grow by turning inward and seeing the reflection for what it truly is. So what do you do with this illusion? So, you begin by questioning your timeline. Not the one marked by birthdays and deadlines. The emotional timeline. Ask yourself, what cycles am I still inside? Where do I keep returning? Even after I've moved on. Which parts of me haven't caught up? Not because they're slow, but because I never truly listened. That's when the mirror starts to shift. That's when you realize the future you isn't ahead of you. They're beside you, waiting for you to stop running long enough to meet them. Not in the next job, not in the next version, but here, in the reflection you've been avoiding. The illusion of forward tells you to keep going. The truth of the mirror asks you to stop. To sit, to reflect, to return, not to the past, but to the present moment you never actually entered, because you were too busy running toward the next one. This isn't stagnation. This is transformation. The kind that happens when you stop pretending that distance equals growth. It doesn't. Depth does. So slow down. Breathe. You're not falling behind. You're just waking up from the dream of motion. And on the other side of that dream is a mirror. One that doesn't show you where you're going, but who you already are. We're told that the past is behind us, that it's fixed, silent, untouchable, like old stone under glass. You can look, but you can't touch. You can remember, but you can't rewrite. But if time is a mirror, that boundary begins to blur. The past doesn't just shape the future. Sometimes it learns from it. It starts subtly. You experience something today that shifts how you remember something from years ago. A moment you thought was painful now feels like protection. A goodbye you mourned becomes a gift. Nothing in history changed, and yet everything did. Because the past isn't dead. It's reflective. And when your awareness shifts, the mirror tilts, sending new light back across the surface of memory. This is how the past learns the future. Not by changing what happened, but by allowing what happens next to inform how it's understood. You've already done this. You just didn't know it. You used to remember that childhood moment with shame. Then one day, after years of growth, you revisit it and realize the younger you was brave, not broken. That's not just perspective. That's the future teaching the past. It bends your entire sense of identity, because you're not just moving forward. You're casting reflections backward, redefining old stories with new eyes, giving your younger selves the wisdom you didn't have yet. Through feeling, through compassion, through re-embodied reflection, the past begins to shimmer differently. Not because it changed, but because you did. This is why healing isn't about forgetting. It's about re-seeing. You don't discard the wound. You let it exist in a different mirror, a softer one, a fuller one. And in that act, you send ripples back across time, not erasing but reweaving. Imagine a timeline like a pond. Drop a stone into the present. The ripples go both directions, forward and back. Your awareness, your growth sends waves into memory. The past receives them, and in doing so, it becomes less heavy, less locked, more alive. Even the idea of regret begins to shift. You may feel the ache of a wrong turn, but as you grow, as your choices deepen, that old decision begins to speak differently. You start to see why you needed to make it, what it protected you from, what it forced you to confront. This is not justification. This is revelation. The past, through the mirror of the future, becomes something else. And that something else feels like peace. There's an illusion that growth happens only forward. But often the deepest transformations are backwards. You reach a level of awareness that finally sends light into a dark room that's been closed for years. And when you open that door, the memory doesn't hurt anymore. It breathes. The past learns by being seen, by being reflected into, by being reheld. Not by trying to change the facts, but by changing the frame. You realize that every version of you who ever felt lost, abandoned, confused, didn't fail. They were unfinished reflections, waiting for the present to return. Not to fix them, but to sit beside them, to say, you didn't know then, but I do now, and I'm here. And suddenly, the past, that museum of locked moments, becomes a garden, not frozen, growing. This also shifts how we imagine legacy. Also, you don't only pass things forward, you pass them back. Your joy teaches your pain how to breathe again. Your forgiveness sends warmth into cold echoes. Your wholeness holds space for the fragments you once disowned. Time is not a straight story. It's a recursive one. Your future self is healing your present. Your present self is reparenting your past. And in between them all, the mirror reflects, bends, softens. This is why you can't rush growth. Because sometimes, it's not about becoming better, it's about becoming clearer, so that when you look back, the moment that once hurt can finally say, "Thank you for seeing me differently." So if you're haunted by a memory, pause. Ask, what might this moment look like from the self I'm still becoming? What lesson might I be missing? What mirror hasn't been turned yet? And then, instead of trying to outrun it, turn back, not to relive it, but to re-reflect it, to allow your present awareness to seep into it like light through cracks. You may not get answers, but you'll get silence. The kind of silence that means the past has just learned something new. There's a kind of light you don't notice right away. It doesn't shine in front of you like a sunrise. It doesn't flood your path with clarity. It moves in reverse, quiet, soft, like the memory of warmth instead of the warmth itself. You don't see where it's coming from. You feel it behind you. You feel it returning. This is the light that walks backward. You felt it before. That strange glow when you finally understand a moment long after it's passed. You say, "Oh, now it makes sense." But the event is over. The lesson arrives late. Or maybe, the light was always moving in reverse. In our minds, light is future-facing. The path ahead is lit. The unknown is waiting to be illuminated. But what if illumination isn't a forward gesture? What if it's a backward one? A reflection seeping gently into everything you thought was finished? Light isn't just vision. It's understanding. And sometimes understanding doesn't lead us, it follows us. It trails behind, weaving soft clarity into things we once ran from. It turns trauma into tenderness, regret into rhythm, silence into signal. This is what healing really looks like. Not a light blazing through the tunnel, but a light that slowly turns around and walks backward into the rooms you locked, into the moments you misread, into the eyes of the younger self who never got closure. We expect transformation to arrive like thunder, but the most honest growth often shows up years later, wrapped in quiet realization, illuminating the past so subtly that you almost miss it. But once you feel it, it's unmistakable. You revisit a painful moment, and no longer tense up. You remember a conversation and feel compassion instead of anger. You read an old journal and smile, not because it's funny, but because it no longer hurts. That's backward light. Not dramatic, not urgent, just inevitable. It's what happens when you stop trying to outrun your story and start walking beside it. When you understand that light doesn't need to announce itself, it arrives when you're ready to see, not when you demand it. And it doesn't ask you to relive the past. It simply relights it. So it shows you corners you never noticed, details you missed because you were too afraid, too hurt, too young to see them then. But now, the mirror has shifted, and the light bends back toward you. That's the strange beauty of time, when seen as reflection. It doesn't just echo forward, it ripples backward. Your current awareness sends light into old chapters, and those chapters begin to glow in ways they never did before. You don't rewrite them, you relight them, and in doing so, you become whole. It also changes the way you see guidance. You no longer need to look so far ahead. You start trusting that the path will be revealed in reverse, that you may not understand the why now, but someday the light will bend backward and show you, and when it does, it will feel inevitable, not forced. This backward light is also why certain people stay with you, even after they're gone, not as ghosts but as reflections. They show up in different forms. A song, a line in a book, a stranger's eyes. You realize they weren't ahead of you, waiting. They were behind you, still glowing in the mirror. And you don't chase them. You walk gently toward the warmth they left behind. The light is memory. The light is wisdom you hadn't earned yet. The light is you becoming the one who can finally see. So if you're in a season of not knowing, if the answers aren't arriving, and the road feels unclear, pause. Stop looking forward for a moment. Turn slightly. Look behind. Not to dwell, but to feel, because somewhere in your past, something is beginning to glow. A moment you didn't understand. A goodbye you couldn't process. And hop, a version of you who is finally ready to be seen, not with fear, but with light. You can't force it. You can't rush it. But you can open to it. You can sit still long enough for the reflection to catch up, for the echo to turn around, for the understanding to arrive from the direction you weren't watching. And when it does, it won't announce itself. It'll settle quietly, like soft sunlight on a windowsill you didn't know existed, and you'll feel it. The moment the past stops hurting, the moment the story becomes clear, the moment the light, walking backward, finally meets you where you are. Sometimes when you look someone in the eye, really look, something strange happens. You forget where you are. You lose your words, not because you're nervous, but because something deeper is happening behind the gaze. A soft reflection, an echo, as if their eyes aren't just windows but mirrors, and something inside them is recognizing something inside you. You've felt it, in a moment of silence between you and someone else, when the air feels thick and no words are needed. You look, and it feels like you've entered another room, one made not of walls but of memory, meaning, reflection. It's not the person, it's the echo inside their eyes, because the eyes don't just see, they reflect. And when you lock eyes with someone, it's not two beings connecting, it's two mirrors facing each other, creating an infinite loop. Your awareness folds into theirs, their pain glints in your vision, your past flickers in theirs, and for a breath, just a breath, it becomes hard to tell who is seeing whom. This is not poetry, this is presence. Mirrors don't care about logic, they return what stands before them. And the eyes are the softest mirrors we carry. When a child stares at you without fear, they're not studying your face, they're echoing your presence. When a stranger holds your gaze too long, and you feel your heart speed up, that's not attraction, that's the mirror trembling, unsure which reflection is yours. And sometimes, it's your own eyes that hold the echo. You glance at yourself in a mirror or in a photo, and suddenly there's a moment, unsettling quiet, where the face looks familiar but distant. Not because you've changed, but because something old is surfacing. A part of you that hasn't looked out from your eyes in a long time. A forgotten version. A buried emotion. A truth you paused long ago. That's the echo. It doesn't speak in words. It vibrates. It shimmers beneath attention. And it reminds you that vision isn't a straight line. It's a loop. What you see reflects what you feel, and what you feel reflects what you once saw. That's why some people make you feel seen before you say a word. Not because they know you, but because their mirrors are still enough to catch your reflection. They're not trying to interpret you. They're just witnessing, quietly. And that silence echoes something inside you that forgot it deserved to be noticed. And that's what the echo inside eyes really is. The forgotten noticing. The unspoken return. The part of you that remembers how to be seen without explanation. It also explains why certain people unsettle you. Not because they're bad, but because their eyes reflect back parts of yourself you haven't accepted. Anger, longing, vulnerability. They become mirrors you didn't choose, but cannot ignore. You flinch, you look away. Not from them, but from the reflection, from the echo. This is why eye contact is so powerful and so rare. Most of the time, we're not looking, we're scanning, performing, checking for cues. But real gaze, sustained, open, still, is a form of surrender, a willingness to see and be seen without defense. When you hold that kind of gaze with someone, you're not connecting minds, you're aligning mirrors, and in that alignment, the illusion of separation blurs. You see not just the person, but the pattern, the flickers of memory behind their eyes, the way their pain rhymes with yours, the shared silence underneath the noise, and maybe, just maybe, they see it too. Not in a dramatic way, not as revelation, but as quiet knowing, an echo passed gently from mirror to mirror. So how do you live with this? How do you navigate a world where every gaze could hold a reflection you're not ready to meet? You slow down, you soften, you begin to look at others and yourself with the understanding that every eye holds a history, a loop of seeing and being seen, a quiet ache to be recognized, not just for the surface but for the story behind the stare. And when you feel the echo rising in someone else's gaze or in your own, don't rush it. Don't explain it. Just stay. Let the mirrors hold each other. You'll begin to feel time slow. The moment thickens. The world hushes. And in that stillness, something impossible happens. You don't just see. You remember. You remember what it's like to exist in full reflection. To be more than a body or a thought or a role. To be mirrored, echoed, real. And you'll understand. Every time you meet someone's eyes, a part of time folds. A mirror aligns. And the universe, for a breath, sees itself. Mirrors are supposed to reflect. To show what is. Cold. Passive. Honest. But what happens when they do something else? When they stop reflecting reality and start imagining it? What happens when mirrors begin dreaming? You've seen it before, though you might not have known what you were looking at. You've felt it in moments that didn't quite belong to time. The middle of the night when you wake and forget who you are, or the morning when the dream still clings to your skin like fog. You stare into space, into nothing, and it stares back with possibilities that don't follow logic. This is what happens when mirrors stop obeying. They dream. Not in the way we dream at night, but in the way awareness slips sideways. The way reality softens at the edges. The way imagination wraps around memory. And suddenly, you're not sure what happened, and what only felt like it did. When mirrors dream, they stop returning the world as it is. They begin bending it toward meaning. A memory you revisit over and over again? That's not obsession. That's a dreaming mirror, trying to show you something more than just what happened. It's hinting at what could have happened, what still might, a version of the moment that your soul is still reaching toward. And this doesn't just happen in your head. It happens in the world. You walk through a familiar place and suddenly feel like it's changed, not physically, but in energy. The walls echo differently. The sky feels closer. You feel like a dream is leaking into the moment. You're right, the mirrors around you are dreaming. Because time, when seen as reflection, isn't linear or fixed. It's imaginative. Every moment is not just a snapshot. It's a possibility. A mirror choosing what to show you based on your presence, your mood, your openness. And sometimes it chooses to dream. You hear a song, and it transports you. Not to a memory, but to a feeling you can't name. A place you've never been, but deeply recognize. That's not nostalgia. That's a dream mirror, showing you a version of yourself that exists in a layer of time, not bound to clocks or calendars. A self that's not behind you or ahead of you, but beside you. Waiting. Mirrors that dream are dangerous, but also liberating. They don't follow rules. They reveal truths that don't need facts. They let you feel futures that haven't happened yet. Let you mourn things that never existed. Let you remember moments from lives you never lived, at least not here, not in this version. This is where art comes from. Where poetry lives. Where music that makes you weep without knowing why finds its roots. These aren't creations. They're dream reflections, fragments from mirrors that refuse to be just functional. When mirrors dream, they stop showing the world as it is. They start showing the world as it feels. And that changes everything. Because now, you're not just reflecting. You're co-creating. Reality becomes collaborative. You look at someone, and their face shimmers with stories you haven't shared. You enter a room, and it welcomes you like an old friend. You touch an object, and it feels like it remembers being held by someone you used to be. It's disorienting. But also deeply intimate. Because for the first time, you're not inside time. You're inside meaning. And meaning isn't stable. It's alive. When mirrors dream, they remind you that your mind is not just a place of thoughts. It's a gallery of possible reflections. Some you've met, some you haven't, all waiting for the right dream mirror to unlock them. And the more open you become to this, the more porous your world gets. Symbols find you. Repetition gains weight. You stop saying, that's just a coincidence. You start saying, that means something. You're not being irrational. You're finally listening to the dreaming. Because dreaming isn't escape. It's alternate clarity. It's what happens when the mirror stops asking, what is real? And starts whispering, what could be more real than this feeling? So what do you do when you realize the mirror is dreaming? You don't wake it up. You follow it. You soften your gaze. You listen for echoes in unlikely places. You trust the moments that don't make sense. And you let yourself dream too. Not just while sleeping, but while awake. Let your reflection blur at the edges. Let your timeline get a little wavy. Let your sense of me stretch into something more curious. Because somewhere in the spaces you've never explored, a mirror is dreaming of you. An hourglass is supposed to be simple, top and bottom, past and future, sand slipping from one into the other, a clean image of time. But what if that hourglass bends? What if the center folds in on itself, and suddenly time isn't falling, it's folding? You see, the hourglass only works if time flows one way. But mirrors don't care about gravity. They reflect, they bend. And when you add a mirror to the hourglass, the illusion of order begins to break. The sand doesn't just fall, it hovers. It loops, it shifts in place like thought. This is the folded hourglass. A symbol not of time slipping away, but of time curling into itself. Of past and future pressing so close that the present becomes an aperture. A pinch in the middle where everything meets, everything blends, everything can be rewritten. You've felt it before. Those strange pockets where time becomes dense, where a moment feels both brief and eternal. A conversation that lasts 5 minutes but changes your entire direction. A song that pulls you back years while somehow grounding you in the now. That's not ordinary time. That's the hourglass folding. In a linear world, time is a loss. Each grain fallen is gone. But in a mirrored world, time is recursive. The sand doesn't disappear, it becomes potential. Every grain that falls may rise again. Every moment that passed may reappear in a different form. Not a copy, a reflection. Think about memory. Think about memory. You recall something from childhood, and it hits you like a wave. Not just as a thought, but as an experience. Your body reacts. You smell the room. You hear the voice. You're not remembering. You're re-entering. The sand has folded. The moment has returned. Not through logic, but through resonance. Now imagine this isn't the exception. Imagine this is how all time works. That every present moment is not a fleeting tick on a clock, but the center of a folded hourglass, where the weight of memory and the pull of possibility meet, compress and breathe. This would mean you're never fully in the past or future. You're always inside the fold, always in the middle of a soft collision between what was and what might be. The present becomes less like a doorway and more like a mirror chamber. And inside that chamber, the sand floats. This is why certain decisions feel impossibly heavy. Why some silences seem to hold entire lifetimes. The weight is real, not in seconds, but in depth. The fold makes time dense. Every choice echoes both directions. A word said in anger now might ripple backward, changing how a memory is held. A single act of kindness now might ripple forward, softening a future moment you haven't yet reached. This is not fantasy. This is feedback. This is the way mirrors behave when placed between currents. They don't just reflect. They merge. In a folded hourglass, the future doesn't wait. It leans. The past doesn't linger. It listens. You are not a passive observer watching sand fall. You are the fold. You are the point where time is bending around itself, trying to understand its own shape. And this changes everything. Because now, you don't live at the mercy of time. You live at the center of its reflection. Which means, you can pause without falling behind. You can reflect without losing momentum. You can touch a memory and change its temperature. You can imagine a future and feel it reach toward you, already beginning to shimmer. And most importantly, you can forgive yourself for not being linear, because you never were. That's why healing isn't orderly. That's why clarity doesn't arrive in sequence. That's why you can feel grief and joy in the same breath. The hourglass has never been a straight line. It was always folded, always mirrored. Always mirrored, always quietly challenging the idea that time moves forward, when maybe it's just breathing in. So if today feels heavy, if the moment holds more than it seems to, don't assume you're broken. You might just be inside the fold, where time is thick, where meaning layers, where the mirrors press close and begin whispering to each other. And in that pressure, in that strange silent wait, something real begins to form. Not the next moment, but a deeper version of this one. One where the sand is not slipping away. It's returning to itself. You're taught that now is fleeting, that it comes, disappears, and is replaced by another now, like train cars sliding endlessly forward. But what if that isn't how it works at all? What if the present isn't a moment that vanishes, but a moment that repeats? What if now is the only thing that ever truly happens, and it just keeps happening again? Not in a loop of events, but in a recurrence of awareness. This is the infinite recurrence of now. You've felt it before. That eerie stillness when you realize the only time you've ever experienced, no matter how far back your memory stretches, was now. You never truly lived in the past. You've only remembered the past from now. You've never visited the future. You've only imagined it from now. Everything you are has only ever existed in one place. This breath, this blink, this exact reflection. Now. And yet, we rarely stay here. We chase what's ahead. We drag what's behind. But the present doesn't move. It doesn't need to. It just reappears again and again, waiting for you to notice that it never left. The illusion is that time flows. But if you pay close attention, it doesn't feel like a river. It feels like a room you keep waking up in, wearing different thoughts, different moods, but the same moment, dressed in shifting layers. Eternal, unmoving, always here. And when you sit with that, when you settle deep into the now, something begins to shimmer. You realize you're not inside a story with a past and future. You're inside a mirror, and each moment is a new angle of the same reflection. This changes how you experience everything. Pain no longer feels like a destination. It becomes a visitor, an echo, arising in this moment, and only ever in this moment. The same is true of joy, of fear, of love. None of them happen over time. They all bloom right here, in now's repeating chamber. And if that's true, then healing doesn't take time. It takes presence. You don't need to wait to grow. You need to enter more fully, to stop skipping ahead, to stop reviewing the past, like a broken recording. The path forward is not a series of new moments. It's a deepening into the one moment that's always been. Right here. Now. But there's more. The recurrence of now also explains why patterns keep finding you. Why you attract the same lessons in different forms. Because if now is repeating, if the mirror keeps resetting, then what you don't resolve returns. Not as punishment, but as reflection. A new chance to meet the moment differently. Not to fix it, to witness it. To finally stay long enough to hear what it's been trying to show you. Most people don't stay. They think life is a line, so they rush. But if you rush a reflection, you miss its message. If you stare too hard, it fogs. You must meet it softly, like seeing your face in still water. No effort, just presence. Because now doesn't demand. It invites. You've spent years trying to outrun what could only be understood by standing still. You say things like, "I've been here before." You have. Not just metaphorically, not in memory, but in the recurrence of now. You're standing in the same sacred mirror, again and again, hoping this time you'll look up and see clearly. And when you do, when you really see, the moment stretches, deepens. It doesn't vanish like it used to. It holds you. This is why presence feels like time slows down. Because it does. Because the only thing speeding time up is your absence from it. The more you arrive, the more time stops needing to change. Because you've finally shown up for the only moment that ever needed you. Now, this is the mystery behind déjà vu. Behind dreams that echo real events. Behind moments that feel strangely familiar for no reason at all. You have been here before. Not because of some cosmic loop, but because now is the only thing that can happen, and it's happening again, and again, and again, until you enter it, fully, without resistance, without expectation, just awareness. And when you do, something shifts. And you stop searching. You stop needing the next thing, because you realize you've already arrived. Not 5 minutes from now, not 5 years ago, here, now, always. Before you enter a room, something else arrives ahead of you. It moves across the floor, stretches against walls, slips silently under doors. It doesn't knock, it doesn't speak, but it's always there, a silent double, cast by the light that follows you everywhere. Your shadow. But what if it's more than just a shape? What if it's time's way of hinting that you're never the first version of yourself to show up? That something always precedes you? Not in the past, but in reflection. You see, when time is seen as a mirror, everything casts a shadow, not just behind, but ahead. And those shadows aren't just passive silhouettes. They're anticipations, reflections arriving before the self is ready. Your fear? It gets there before your courage. Your assumptions? They step in before your curiosity. Your doubt? It precedes your truth. And so you walk into situations already outlined by the echo of who you think you are. Not realizing the room met your shadow before it met you. This is why some spaces feel tense before a word is spoken. Why people react to you in ways you can't explain. It's not just energy. It's the architecture of reflection. You are not the only thing the world responds to. It responds to what arrives before you. And often, that is your shadow. Not the one on the ground. The one in your choices. In your posture. In your tone. In the hesitation behind your yes. Shadows are the stories we carry, sometimes unconsciously, that enter the moment before we do. They come shaped like memory, like defense, like history bending the present through expectation. You walk into love, already braced for loss. You begin something new, already anticipating failure. You meet someone, already suspecting you won't be seen. That's the shadow arriving first, and the moment reacts to it. Not to punish you, but to mirror what you bring. So how do you stop it? You don't. You don't outrun the shadow. You meet it. You walk slower. You notice what your presence is reflecting. You ask yourself, before speaking, before moving, what has already arrived in this space before I did? Is it fear? Is it judgment? Is it memory? Because if you can see the shadow, you can soften it. You can shift the mirror. You can step in not as a reflection of your past, but as a recognition of your present. You can arrive whole. This awareness also helps you see others differently. Sometimes the version of a person you're speaking to isn't really them, it's their shadow. The self that was shaped by pain. The self that doesn't trust. The self that moves first before their real voice can catch up. And when you learn to see this, you stop reacting to the echo. You begin responding to the presence beneath it. That's compassion. That's mirror seeing. But your shadow isn't just your fear. It's also your intuition. It's the quiet knowing that enters first when something isn't right. The gut feeling before logic arrives. The moment of pause before a decision that changes everything. Not all shadows are warnings. Some are wisdom arriving ahead of time. This is where the mirror of time gets strange. Because sometimes, your future self sends its shadow backward. You feel a pull. You follow a path you don't fully understand. And later you realize, something in me already knew. The shadow arrived first. Time, in its mirrored nature, is full of these gestures. Echoes, whispers, silhouettes of truths that haven't taken form yet, but already live in the fold. And your job is not to dismiss them. Your job is to recognize them. To feel where your presence is being preceded, and ask why. Is it a defense? Is it a calling? Is it a version of you that hasn't caught up, or one that's already moved ahead? Either way, the awareness opens something. You stop stumbling into moments half-formed. You begin arriving with clarity, with presence, with the mirror gently held, instead of unconsciously cast. And the shadow? It softens. It integrates. It no longer drags you. It walks beside you. Not as a warning, but as a quiet reminder that wherever you go, however you show up, whatever moment you're walking into, part of you has already been there, watching, waiting, reflecting. You think of memory as something you hold, a file tucked away in the mind, something you look back on when you choose. But what if memory doesn't stay where you left it? What if it isn't still? What if instead of you watching your memories are watching you? You sit in a room, the light the same, the silence familiar, and something flickers inside, a moment from long ago, a gesture, a face, a sentence you thought you forgot, but you didn't summon it. It came to you, almost like it was waiting, watching, choosing the right time to step out of its hidden corner in the mirror. This is not nostalgia. This is surveillance. Not from above, but from behind. Memory doesn't sit passively in your brain. It loops through you, observes, intervenes. It shapes the way you see the world before you even realize what you're looking at. You avoid a street, not knowing why, and later remember that something terrible once happened there. You dislike a person on instinct, only to realize they remind you of someone who hurt you once. You hesitate before joy, because somewhere in the folds of memory, pain is watching, waiting to see if it's safe to relax. When time is a mirror, memory isn't the past. It's the reflection in the glass behind you. It's not just what you've lived, it's what you're still living, again and again, subtly shifted by the present moment's lighting. You don't always recall, but memory remembers you. And that remembering has power. Because if memory watches you, it can also mislead you. Have you ever remembered something and then questioned if it was real? Did it happen the way you feel it did, or has it changed every time you looked back at it? That's the thing about mirrored time. Every reflection alters slightly when you turn your head. Every act of remembering reshapes the memory. And then, that new shape watches you next time. It's not just a loop. It's a dance of distortions, of feedback, of reflections watching reflections. And this is how your present becomes haunted. Not by ghosts, but by echoes. An old embarrassment still watching you from across years, making you flinch when you speak now. A heartbreak that still peers through the mirror of every new relationship. A single failure that keeps eye contact with your ambition. They are not gone. They are not silent. They are just sitting behind the glass, observing, and sometimes whispering. Not with sound, but with feeling. A resistance here, a pause there, a blink of doubt, just before you say yes to something life-changing. It's easy to think of time as moving on, but in the mirror, nothing moves on. It stays, it watches, and it waits for the next reflection to align with it. And yet, this isn't a trap. It's a truth. And truths can be powerful when seen clearly. Because once you know your memories are watching you, you can turn toward them. You can meet their gaze. You can say, I see you. I know why you're here. But you don't have to shape this moment anymore. This is the alchemy of time consciousness. You become aware of the observers behind the mirror, and in that awareness you become the one who chooses, not the one who reacts. You shift from being the watched to the witness. To the witness, and when you do, the mirror softens. You see that not all watching is threat. Sometimes your memories watch you with hope. The child you were watches to see if you finally felt safe. The version of you who survived stillness watches to see if you found movement. The you that once imagined more watches quietly, wondering if you'll still choose it. And when you meet those memories with presence, not fear, not denial, but recognition, something changes. The watcher becomes the companion. The memory stops haunting and starts guiding. It no longer pulls your hand from behind. It places its palm gently in yours beside you. This is when mirrored time begins to feel less like a maze and more like a choir, a chorus of selves, a continuum of witness. Each reflection, not a trap, but a teacher. Each watcher, not a warden, but a version of you, wanting to be seen. So next time something in you tightens without reason, pause. Next time your breath catches in a room that seems harmless, pause. Next time your heart beats fast around someone kind, pause. And listen, not to the outside world, but to the memory watching from the mirror. It has something to say, and you now have the power to respond. There's a moment just before something happens again when the air thickens. The world pauses. Nothing has yet repeated, but you can feel it coming. A silence so loud it's nearly visible, like time is holding its breath, like the mirror is about to flicker. This silence isn't absence, it's tension. And if you listen closely, it speaks. It says, here it comes again. Are you different this time? In a world where time is a mirror, repetition isn't about loops. It's about tests. About watching yourself replay the same decision, the same mistake, the same emotion, and asking, will I see it now before it completes itself? It begins with subtle patterns. You meet someone new, but the dynamic feels familiar. You enter a room, and your chest tightens with déjà vu. You hear a phrase and it unlocks a whole feeling you didn't realize you still carried. The silence before repetition is where time tests your awareness. And if you fail to notice, the moment plays out like it always has. The argument escalates in the same rhythm. The opportunity slips in the same way. The fear wins with the same excuse. But if you do notice, something shifts. The silence is no longer a trap. It becomes a chance. A portal. The split-second window where mirrored time reveals its secret. Nothing is predetermined, but everything is patterned. That means you're not stuck. But you are being watched, not by some external force, but by time itself. watching to see if you've woken up, watching to see if you're aware of the loop before you enter it again. The silence before repetition is not empty, it is dense with memory. You feel it in your body before your mind names it. The tightening jaw, the twitch in your fingertips, the familiar pacing of your thoughts, the cadence of an emotional rhythm you thought you outgrew. This is the body remembering what the mind forgot or ignored, because the mind will often trick you. This time is different. But the mirror doesn't lie. The mirror shows, not tells. You don't need to recall the last time you snapped in frustration, or the previous time you avoided what mattered. You just need to look at what's about to happen again, and see it for what it is. Repetition isn't always loud. Sometimes it enters with grace. A soft step, a smile you've fallen for before. A task you've delayed under the same excuse. A story you've told yourself so many times that it feels like truth. But between the trigger and the choice, there is silence. It may last only half a breath, but it's in that half breath where change can begin. Most people never live in that moment. They pass through it unconsciously. The mirror flickers, the reflection speaks, and the self responds. Not by choice, but by programming. Because in mirrored time, everything that has ever happened is ready to happen again, if you let it. And yet, you can break the rhythm, but not by force, but by attention, by stillness, by inhabiting the silence, not trying to rush it or fill it or flee from it, but listening to what it contains. The silence before repetition is not a warning. It is an invitation to interrupt the unconscious, to speak gently to your past selves, to say, I know this pattern, I've felt this before, I see it now, and I choose something else. Even if that choice is small, even if it's just a pause, a breath, a softening, a turning of the head in another direction, that's enough to break the reflection. That's enough to ripple the mirror. Because change doesn't shout. It whispers inside the silence. And repetition doesn't stop because you want it to. It stops because you became aware of the silence that came before it. Because you stopped reacting and started witnessing. Time, when seen as a mirror, is not a tyrant. It is a teacher. It reflects what you need to see until you see it. And then only then does it show you something new. You don't escape the pattern by rejecting the past. You escape it by listening to it, by seeing how it lives in your breath, your words, your posture, and by honoring the silence that comes before it all happens again. So when life feels like it's repeating, when it feels like you've been here before, ask yourself, what is this silence asking me to notice? And more importantly, what happens if I don't answer with the same script? The silence before repetition is not a void. It's a mirror without fog. Look closely, and you'll see yourself not the one who repeats, but the one who watches. And in that watching, everything can change. What if it's not you moving through time, but your reflection instead? A ripple stepping ahead of you, a shadow made of memory. A version of yourself that always arrives first, not to lead, but to echo. And what if that echo is what actually lives your life? What if everything you experience is a trail left behind by something else, something that already passed through? In a world where time is a mirror, you're never walking forward, you're walking through echoes. You don't travel through time. Your reflection does. And you simply follow the shimmer it leaves behind. Think about it. Why do you sometimes feel like you've been somewhere before, even if you know you haven't? Why do words leave your mouth before you think them, like something else is speaking through you? Why do some choices feel like they've already been made the moment the options appear? Because maybe, in this mirror of time, your reflection has already moved, and you are its afterimage. We were taught that reflections are passive, that they follow us. But in this theory, reflections lead. Not in space, but in sequence. You don't look into a mirror to see who you are. You look into it to see who you're becoming, just before you become it. The reflection becomes the traveler. It crosses thresholds before you reach them. It makes decisions you feel as intuition. It warns you in dreams. It arrives in the room before your body does. You know this feeling. You've walked into a situation and known what was about to happen. Not because of logic, not because of analysis, but because something inside you had already lived it, already mirrored it. already traveled. In this timeline, your reflection becomes your memory before the experience, not after. That's why some moments feel like prophecy. Not in the mystical sense, but in the reflective one. Because the mirror's job is not to delay. It is to show you what is already arriving. And you, the self, try to catch up. But you never do. Because you were never supposed to. You were only meant to witness, not to control, but to reflect back. Time doesn't carry you forward like a river. It pulls your image across a glass surface. And you live in the wake of that shimmer. But this doesn't mean you're powerless. It means your real self isn't linear. You are not the one taking the step. You are the awareness that sees the step reflected. And that changes everything. Because if you know that your reflection travels ahead, you can begin to listen to its echoes. You can feel its choices before they manifest. You can slow down and align with its rhythm, not to control, but to remember. To remember what you already are, and what's about to return. In mirror time, intuition isn't magic. It's recognition. You're not predicting the future. You're catching up to your reflection. You're glimpsing the traveler through the fog. And when you pause long enough, you see it standing just ahead, moving without moving, waiting without waiting. It doesn't speak in words. It speaks in timing. In rhythm. Or in sudden calm. In that eerie feeling that this, whatever this is, has already happened. Because it has. To your reflection. And that reflection is you. Only it's not stuck in the illusion of past, present, future. It drifts across time like a figure across still water. And the ripples you live are its footprints. Sometimes we feel haunted by our own thoughts. But maybe that haunting is just the traveler brushing past. And sometimes we make choices that don't feel like ours, but perhaps they are, just made first by the mirror self. Every strange coincidence. Every flash of familiarity. Every dream that feels more like a warning than a memory. These are echoes of the traveler. And when you listen, time begins to shimmer. It stops being a hallway. It becomes a corridor of reflections. You don't walk down it. You awaken inside it. And everything that seems new has a shadow, a pattern, a prior shimmer. This is not fate. It is mirrored possibility. And the reflection doesn't demand your obedience. It invites your awareness. When you see it clearly, you're no longer reacting to time. You're dancing with it. You stop asking, what happens next? And you begin asking, what is my reflection trying to show me right now? Not what happened before, not what will happen next, but what is already traveling ahead, waiting for you to catch its gaze. So next time you feel déjà vu, or find yourself pausing in a quiet room, sensing something unexplainable, don't dismiss it. You might be standing inside a reflection, and the traveler, your mirror self, might be watching you, waiting, not to lead you, but to remind you. You are not bound to the straight line. You are a shimmer inside the glass, a ripple that remembers, a reflection that travels. There's something, or someone, watching it all. Not from outside the world, but from behind time itself, behind the seconds that tick, behind the hours that pass, a quiet observer, not constrained by clocks or calendars, and maybe that observer is you. Not the you that wakes up and brushes your teeth. Not the you that worries about deadlines or plans for tomorrow, but the you that simply watches, the one who sees the pattern repeat, who notices the way time folds, the part of you that never really moves, even though everything else does. In this theory, time is a mirror, and a mirror needs something to reflect, but it also needs someone to look through it. That someone is the observer, and the observer doesn't live inside time. It lives behind it. Think about your life. You've been through joy and pain, beginnings and endings, loss and discovery, and yet, there is a silent part of you that remains unchanged. The part that notices without speaking. The part that was there when you were 5, and is still there now, even though everything around it has changed. That part of you doesn't age. And it doesn't rush. It doesn't panic. Because it doesn't belong to time. It watches time. In every moment of stillness, when you pause and feel like the world is spinning without you, that's the observer taking over. The quiet hum behind the chaos. You're not lost in time. You're seeing it from behind the glass. This explains why some moments feel stretched, like a minute lasts forever, and why others vanish too quickly, as if they barely happened. It's not the moments that change, it's your position in relation to them. Sometimes you're inside the moment, other times you're behind it. Watching, witnessing, waiting. Have you ever stared into a mirror and seen yourself differently? As if for a second the image looking back was not quite you, but someone older, or wiser, or beyond what you can explain. That's not imagination. That's a glimpse of the observer, the version of you that isn't chained to your biography. Because in this mirror time theory, your life isn't a line, it's a series of reflections. And the observer is the one steady light, standing behind the glass, watching it all reflect. Sometimes we mistake the observer for a voice in our head. But it's not a voice, it's the space the voices echo into. It's the awareness of the thought, not the thought itself. When you say, "I feel anxious," that's the mind speaking. But when you notice that sentence, that's the observer listening. It's the gap between your reaction and your awareness. The pause between impulse and insight. The stillness behind the movement. And here's where it gets even stranger. If time is a mirror, and your reflection is the one walking ahead, then who's holding the mirror? Who's watching all of this unfold? Not from the first-person view, not from memory, but from the eternal now, behind every flicker of past and future. It's the observer. And that's the truest part of you. It doesn't care about your story. It doesn't cling to success or failure. It simply watches the play of reflections. And in that watching, it becomes the one real constant. Everything else, your roles, your name, your history, is just a costume changing across mirrored time. But the observer remains naked, silent, aware. This is why people speak of awakening. Not as learning something new, but as remembering something ancient inside. That you are not the reflection. You are the one watching the reflection. And when you realize this, the entire illusion of linear time softens. You stop chasing. You stop regretting. You begin seeing time not as something you must navigate, but as something that happens within your field of observation. Suddenly, you're not a character in the story. You are the space. The story unfolds inside. You're not the moment. You're the mirror that contains the moment. This is why mindfulness feels powerful, because it brings the observer forward. This is why silence is sacred, because it lets the mirror clear. And this is why some people seem timeless. Not because they don't age, but because they live from the observer, not the character. They walk slower, speak softer, carry awareness like a flame that doesn't flicker with every gust of time, because they know they're not moving forward. They're watching the reflections move. They are behind the mirror, not trapped within it. And so are you. Always have been. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by the speed of life, the ticking of deadlines, the weight of the future, pause, close your eyes, and remember, the you who notices all this isn't inside the storm. You're behind it, watching. Still, free. It was never just a reflection. All this time you thought the mirror showed the outside. Your face, your hands, the room behind you. But the more you look, the more you start to sense it. There's another world inside the glass. Not behind you, not in front of you, inside. A world made not of atoms but of echoes, patterns, rehearsals, a stage where every expression you've ever worn still lingers like old ghosts of your own making. And if time is a mirror, this inner world may be where time actually lives. Because everything that reflects contains. It's not just your body the mirror catches. It's your movements, your moods, the invisible tension behind your smile. A complete record of presence, a map of what once was, trapped but still alive, inside that smooth sheet of glass. And if you look long enough, you'll notice something watching back. Your own eyes, but not quite you. Not the one who blinked, the one who didn't. Because the reflection doesn't age the same way. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't forget. It just remains, locked in light. Locked in the exact angle you once occupied. That's the paradox. You're looking into a world you already left behind, yet it's still playing out like a loop waiting to close. What if everything you see around you isn't the real world, but the inner side of a giant cosmic mirror? A projection so convincing, so flawlessly rehearsed, that you mistake it for real? What if time flows not forward but inward? folding like layers of glass stacked behind each other, each moment just a deeper pain. The air you breathe, the light on your skin, the silence between words, all just reflections cast inside this chamber of mirrored memory. A world where cause and effect have been reversed, where every action is the response to something already seen. It would mean that your present is not something that creates your future, but something that reflects it. And when you notice patterns, when you feel déjà vu, or when a day feels eerily similar to another you can't quite name, it's not a glitch, it's a bleed-through. The mirrored world folding back into itself. Inside this world behind the glass, everything has a twin. Every smile you gave, every tear you hid, every moment you thought passed quietly, it didn't vanish. It pressed itself into the mirror, and it stayed. You see, reflections aren't just visual. They're energetic, emotional, existential. Have you ever walked into an empty room and felt something there? Not someone, not a ghost, just a presence. A leftover reflection of someone who once was, maybe even you. That's the world inside the glass. Not dead, but paused, suspended, timeless, but not lifeless. A second reality you brush against every time you stare into your own eyes and hesitate. And maybe, just maybe, the reason we feel fear when we stare into a mirror too long is because we're not afraid of what's outside the glass. We're afraid of waking up inside it, of realizing we've been in there all along, watching, waiting, mimicking every version of ourselves that ever was, hoping one day we'll stop and see it. This theory suggests time isn't something we walk through, it's something we look into. And the deeper we look, the more we realize we're not watching time. Time is watching us. Your life, the events, the choices, the detours. They're not creating a future. They're reflecting an intention that's already there, like turning your head to see where light has already fallen. You thought you were moving through a hallway, but you've been in a gallery of mirrors. Every decision you make is a tilt of the mirror, a reframing, a redirection of light. And every new moment is a reflection of something you almost remembered. Here's the question no one asks. What happens to all those reflections when you change? When you learn something that breaks your pattern? When you become something your reflection hasn't seen before? Do the mirrored moments update themselves? Or do they crack? Maybe that's what heartbreak is. The moment the world inside the glass no longer matches what's standing outside it. The moment you realize the reflection can't follow you anymore. Because you've grown, because you've stepped outside the mirror, and now you're the one holding it. This shift changes everything. It means you can reframe your entire life not by changing what happened, but by seeing it differently, by changing the angle of the glass. It means healing isn't rewriting your past, it's letting it reflect from a different light. It means you're not chasing your future, you're allowing it to reflect clearly. But you must clean the mirror, remove the fog. Stand still, because every distortion you carry, guilt, regret, shame, is like a smudge on the glass. And it makes the reflections lie, not because they are false, but because they've been blurred. You are the mirror, you are the one inside it, and you are the one watching it. All at once, the world inside the glass isn't a fantasy. It's your memory crystallized, it's your potential rehearsing, and it's your consciousness learning how to look back at itself, not in time, but in truth. There is a sound the mind makes when something no longer fits. That's what happens when the mirror breaks. It's not a scream, not a shatter, but a kind of soft rupture, like the sound of a truth stepping forward, quietly, from behind a long-held illusion. Not the mirror on your wall, not the reflection in the bathroom after a long day, but the mirror of time, the one you've mistaken for a path, the one you've trusted as a guide. Time has always been too neat in its story. You see, you were told that time moves like a river, that it flows forward, one direction, always away from the past. But the more you've watched, the more you've sensed something else. Loops, echoes, reversals, memories that arrive too early, emotions from futures not yet lived. The mirror is no longer clean, no longer holding the image steady, no longer pretending that what it shows is the only version of you. And here you are, staring into the fragmented surface, each shard showing a slightly different version of your life, one where you left earlier, one where you stayed too long, one where you spoke the words, one where you swallowed them whole. But now, something has cracked. At first, you try to piece it back together. You reach for the familiar shape, the comforting illusion, but your hands bleed. Because mirrors, when broken, don't want to be restored, they want to be released. Maybe the mirror was never showing you who you are. You begin to realize something terrifying. And once that illusion breaks, so does the timeline it built. Maybe it was showing you who you thought you had to be. Now, time folds. Not forward, not back, inward. Like paper turning to ash, like breath, returning to the chest that forgot it was holding it. You notice that reality feels softer now, less stable, more like a dream that's learned your name. Things repeat that shouldn't, patterns emerge where randomness used to live. You wake up remembering events that never happened and forgetting the ones that did, like a story realizing it never had a beginning at all. And yet, there's a calm underneath the confusion, a sense that you're not lost. You're just waking up from the story the mirror was telling. You're finally seeing what it hid behind its smooth perfection, the fact that you were always the one reflecting time, not the other way around. But breaking the mirror comes at a cost. You must live without its frame, without its approval, without its illusions. You must walk without a clear timeline, without a future that obeys, without a past that stays fixed. You must become mirrorless, which is to say free. Free to see every version of yourself without shame. Free to remember moments that never occurred, but still mattered. Free to live not as a line, but as a center, a consciousness through which time spirals, shifts, collapses, and restarts. You're not the person looking at the reflection anymore. You're the light that caused it. And now that the glass has shattered, your light touches everything. There is no more before. There is only what is being seen now. So what will you reflect? What will you allow the pieces of broken time to scatter into? What meaning will you pour into the space where the mirror used to be? Because the mirror's job is over. It did what it was meant to do. It showed you a version of yourself, long enough for you to question it. And now that it's broken, you can begin. So here we are at the edge of the mirror. Not the end of time, but the edge of how you once understood it. What once felt like a line, a ticking sequence from birth to decay, now stands revealed as something far stranger, softer, and infinitely more alive. A mirror, reflective, repeating, recursive, but never passive. And you, not just a traveler through this mirror, but its co-creator. You see it clearly now, don't you? Because every step you took along the so-called timeline was never truly forward, it was always inward. Every memory, a reflection of a question you hadn't yet asked. Every future vision, an echo of a forgotten now. And in that moment, the moment the mirror broke, everything began to unfold backward and forward at once. Time wasn't dragging you behind it. It was watching you decide what to see, what to remember, what to call real. The mirror was your own construction designed to comfort, to organize, to explain. But like all illusions, it cracked the moment you truly looked into it. What you thought was destiny was just a loop you kept rehearsing. What you thought was memory was a pattern disguised as permanence. And what you thought was you might have just been the reflection time needed to make sense of itself. But now you're free of that. Now, time no longer has to make sense. It just is. You are not the line. And you? You no longer have to chase the next moment. You no longer have to outrun the past or anxiously invent the future. You can simply observe, like the still water that reflects everything, without becoming any of it. You are the surface the line appears on. You are the silence that makes it sound possible. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, know this: you are not the ticking clock. The mirror no longer holds you. And in its absence, you are not lost. You are infinite. And if time ever starts to feel like a trap again, a race, a burden, a direction you can't escape, just return to this place, this thought, this quiet, but a mirror you finally stopped believing in, where time is not a line you walk, and where every reflection now belongs to you.